habitats, and police department inspections of vacant lots for coyote dens. All of these steps that we have taken were the right ones. They are important. They are essential. We also know that they are, at this point, insufficient. We wouldn't be having this meeting if they were sufficient. So the question for tonight is, what remains to be done? And without prejudging where this discussion will go, I think what remains to be done are complicated issues. They're difficult. They are complex. They have legal implications. Some may have cost implications. There are efficacy questions. There are durability questions. And there is no one perfect answer, but we do need to consider all the remaining options and to work with them in concert with our existing efforts over time to address this issue. I think it's really important to have public input tonight. I just want to say at the outset, we understand the urgency and the magnitude and the significance of this issue. And we're trying to learn from you what your views of the best way forward is. And we appreciate all that input. Thank you for being here, and I'll turn it over to Robert Zeving, our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Lynch. As it is stated in the memorandum to City Council, wildlife, specifically coyotes, have always had a presence in Belvedere and the Tiburon Peninsula. However, since August of 2022, there's been a dramatic increase in the number of coyote sightings and pet attacks in our community. Over the summer, we took swift action and sought out the advice of Marin Humane, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and our neighboring cities to see how other communities were addressing this problem. Through those consultations, we learned that Belvedere is not alone in this problem. Yeah, every city in Marin must contend with coyotes being present in their community to some extent. And not surprisingly, the problem is worse in regions that back up to open space. That said, we set out early with policy changes and educational outreach. First, we changed the way wildlife interactions are reported. Rather than instructing residents to call into Marin Humane, the city asked callers to report any coyote-related incidents directly to the Belvedere Police Dispatch. The on-duty officer is tasked with investigating the call and recording information related to location, time, and nature. This information and data is transmitted quarterly to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and Marin Humane Animal Control. Chief Wu will comment more on this in just a moment. The Belvedere Police Department also increased active patrolling on our streets, especially at dusk and dawn when coyote activity is most common. Police are instructed to aggressively haze any coyotes they encounter while on patrol. We are providing hazing kits to the Belvedere and Tiburon residents upon request. These kits have provided detailed information on coyote hazing and include a sound-making device that has proven helpful if you encounter a coyote. We posted educational signage around City Hall. The signage is in the public areas, but also in places where coyote sightings are seen most frequently. The signs have a lot of great information and QR links to the city's website with other links to other departments and state websites. The police department is also actively performing inspections of vacant lots, parks, and other open spaces for evidence of coyote dens. And then finally, we produced the citywide mailer alerting residents to the presence of aggressive coyotes. The mailer included ways to protect their home and pets, along with a description of specific actions the city was taking to address this growing problem. Although coyote reports have been diminishing in December and early January, those are back on the rise. What is particularly challenging about Belvedere is its geography. We are an island community connected by two narrow roadways. Most of the island is made up of residential property that is fully built out. Aside from a few small parks, there is minimal open space where coyotes can retreat. This leads to a high number of sightings in a very dense urban environment. With spring approaching, we're anticipating those sightings and incidents to intensify. In some cases in Marin, increased coyote presence has been linked to one or more persons intentionally feeding coyotes and wildlife. But for a majority, education has been effective in reducing attractants for animals, thus reducing populations and stopping the progress towards habituation of wildlife. Part of tonight's discussion will focus on education, the do's and don'ts around coyote management, and some of the best practices we should all adopt as a community. However, I also want to recognize that many residents have shared stories where coyotes in Belvedere seem to be unaffected by traditional hazing techniques. Coyotes have become bold, aggressive, and may not back down to typical scaring techniques. What's worse is that these coyotes have moved on to attacking and killing pets. This is a serious concern, so this evening's discussion will also focus on state laws around trapping and the removal of problem animals. Our panel this evening is a combination of biologists, state wildlife officials, and local coyote experts. I'd like to welcome Dr. Carolyn Whitesell, who's a Human Resource Interactions Advisor with the University of California's Cooperative Extension. Garrett Allen, Unit Wildlife Biologist with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Dr. Alex Hareen, Human Dimensions Research Scientist with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. David Stapp, Field Services Supervisor for Marine Humane, and Kelly Hendricks, Ranching and Wildlife Coordinator with Project Coyote. They have all graciously agreed to carve out time in their busy schedule to attend this event. You know, there's a lot that they could be doing tonight, so thank you for attending. Tonight's meeting, we'll start out with these presentations. I'm going to hand it over to Jason in just a moment, and then as we wrap up, we'll open it up to questions and answers. Any questions?
Thank you, Robert. Any questions for Robert at this time from council? Seeing none, thank you. Chief Wu?
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Lynch, council members, and community members. In response to our community's concerns, we have asked our residents to directly contact the police department instead of the Humane Society, so that we may intentionally gather data and to further gather support and to provide this information to California Department of Fish and Wildlife and Marine Humanes, that hopefully that perhaps may assist them in formulating sound and legal strategies to deal with our issues. So we started tracking data back in October of last year, and year to date, which will be February 14th of this year. And next one, please. So as you can tell, from October to February, we captured 61 incidents that's reported directly to Belvedere Police Department. Perhaps there may be more, but these are the incidents that were reported directly to us. And looking at the chart, you can see that in October, when we started this, we had 23 reported incidents, and it dropped precipitously in November and in December. However, back in January, there is a spike of 23 reports, and in February, we have 9 year to date. And we have a little map here with X's showing where the coyote incidents were reported from, and it's kind of give you a visualization of where they're occurring in Belvedere. And as you can tell, it's primarily centered on the island itself. We broke down these reports into different categories. So from October 22 to February 23, we received a total of 70 incidents that were reported to the police department, which included 52 sightings, 5 vocalizations, 3 incidents where pets were either rushed or chased, 4 incidents where coyotes were reported to have followed or stalked either people or pets. And we have a total of 6 reported attacks on pets, but the caveat is actually there's 4 actual reports. 2 were duplicates from other residents. So even though we received 6 attacks on pets, we've actually had 4. What we did is we went back additional 6 years back to 2017 to see a trend. And in 2017, we had 1 reported coyote incidents, 2 in 2018, and none for 19, 20, 21, and 39 for the year 2022, and 32 year to date for 2023. And going back to 2017, we trying to capture data where we have information on either attacks on humans or animals. In 2019, we had a report of a deer that was killed and dragged by unknown animal, but we presumed to be coyote. In 2022, we had a resident who reported to us anecdotally that there has been ongoing attacks on her animals, and it was just one report as opposed to multiple reports. And in 2023, so far, we have 3 documented attacks by coyotes on property. And this includes our data, and am available for questions.
Thank you, Chief Wu. Do we have any questions for Chief Wu at this time from council? Not seeing any. Thank you, Chief Wu. And Robert, can we turn it over to Dr. Whitesall for our first expert presentation?
Of course. Dr. Whitesell, whenever you're ready.
Sounds good. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to be talking just generally about some coyote biology, and that will directly be related to some of the mitigation strategies that we'll be discussing tonight. So coyotes can occur either as solitary individuals or in packs. I sometimes have people that are a little concerned when they see multiple coyotes together. This is a natural behavior. They will form packs and live with that social structure. Their territory size is going to vary based on resource availability and the sex of the individual. For this instance, let's really focus on the resource availability. Their territory size can be as small as less than a half square mile. Certainly Belvedere is quite small, but if there's plenty of food, that's going to be sufficient for the coyotes. In the Bay Area, their only natural enemies are going to be mountain lions and people. When we think about people, it's most often cars, vehicle strikes. And I encourage you to remember that population of coyotes is going to be a reflection of available resources. So the more food that they're able to access, they're going to be able to then have smaller home ranges potentially, and then more individuals will be able to fit into a given area. Now, coyotes really are the ultimate opportunistic omnivore. They are so adaptable, and a large reason for that is because they're able to switch their diet to make use of whatever is available to them. Primarily, they're going to be going after small rodents and mammals. So this is a benefit for us, right? We want them going after rats or bunnies or mice, things that can cause other sorts of damage on our property. Coyotes are also going to be going after fruits, nuts, berries. Birdseed is a big one. They not only will go after the birdseed itself if you have a feeder in your yard, but all of those little seeds that are going to fall to the ground, those are going to attract rodents, which then the coyotes will prey upon. Also, they can eat insects, eggs, birds. So if you have chickens, you need to protect both the chickens themselves and the eggs they produce. They can eat amphibians, reptiles, carrion, so any roadkill. They can hunt deer, and they absolutely love pet food. And so I've bolded the food items that we often do find on people's properties. And that's just to remind you to think through, like, are you incidentally providing any of these food resources on your own property? Pet food is a big one. So I encourage anyone who wants to feed any of their pets outside to be present. Make sure that once your pet has finished eating, then go ahead and pick up the bowl. And also don't store any of your pet food outside, because coyotes can figure out oftentimes a way to get into it. And the joy of living in California, right? We're able to grow so many different types of fruit and different nuts or berries. But if you have fruit trees especially, I encourage you to pick up any fruit that has fallen to the ground and any ripe fruit on the trees. Even if you aren't going to, be interested in consuming it yourself, if you leave it on the lower hanging branches, the coyotes will be able to access it. And actually in my yard, I live down on the peninsula in Los Altos Hills, and I have coyotes in my neighborhood too. And I've seen them jumping into persimmon trees, grabbing the ripe persimmons. So really be cognizant of all these different, amazing food resources that we may not be thinking about that are all over different properties. And I also want to mention that, unfortunately for us, cats and small dogs are going to be viewed as prey items by coyotes. And this is natural behavior. The act of a coyote going after an outdoor cat or going after a dog that's off leash in a yard, that isn't in and of itself aggressive behavior because they're viewing them the same as they would a rat or a bunny. It's a small mammal and they view that as a prey item and they will act accordingly. I also want to mention feral cat colonies because they're able to provide food to coyotes in multiple ways. Think of the birdseed example I gave. So for feral cat colonies, if people are feeding the cats, then any of the cat food that's being left, coyotes are able to access. Any of the cat food that's attracting rats or mice to it, the coyotes will then be going after the rats and mice. And also the coyotes will be going after the cats themselves. So just something to keep in mind when you're thinking through how we may be unintentionally feeding them. Now, I don't roll your eyes. I know that it sounds like some of these coyotes aren't reacting quite as well to hazing or to humans as we may like, but I do want to remind everyone that typically coyotes are shy around humans. That being said, in some areas they have lost or are losing their fear of people. So I don't want to belittle that point. You know, I absolutely, in my neighborhood as well, have coyotes that sometimes will follow me on walks. They'll be in my backyard if my dog's not out there. Luckily, I have a big enough dog that I don't need to worry about it. But most of the time, in instances where there have been recorded instances of very aggressive coyotes, so think, bites or really strong aggression, when people have gone in and done a little bit more digging and a little bit more research to find out what's going on in this neighborhood, what's going on with this particular coyote, most of the time, they're able to find out that someone has been feeding that coyote, either intentionally or unintentionally. Now, we don't understand the full mechanism why the act of accessing human food seems to alter their behavior and make them more aggressive. We don't know why, but we do just know that there seems to be some correlation between those two events. So when coyotes begin associating humans with food, that's when we often run into the most problems. And really, this is where prevention is so much more important than trying to deal with it later on. So if you have a coyote that isn't acting aggressive yet, this is really the time to act. Really try to think through, if I'm being good about not having available food for them, what about all of my neighbors? Because unfortunately, it only takes one person in a neighborhood who is maybe setting out cat food and the coyote every day is coming and eating that cat food. That may be plenty of calories for that coyote. And so that's where really it's so important for the whole neighborhood to come together and act as a team. Now, I just want to show this really quick video clip to demonstrate how agile coyotes are. And so when we're thinking about, our backyards, you can have a beautifully constructed new 6-foot fence. But unfortunately, that's not going to keep coyotes out. And for fences that are as tall as 10 feet, they can still sometimes climb over them. But that being said, later on in other presentations, we'll be going over what are some other ways that we can keep our backyard safe, given how agile coyotes are. Now, coyote reproduction. This is really important to understand, and we're getting right into denning season. So now is a really good time to remind ourselves about what that's going to mean in terms of coyotes in residential neighborhoods. So coyotes breed once per year, typically between January and March. So right now, the end of the breeding season, or sorry, the middle, gosh, I'm forgetting which month we're in. They're going to excavate dens, but they're really going to figure out many different places they can use as dens. So they can use culverts, they can use any hollow logs, any rock piles. They can just dig out a little bit under a bush. And having seen coyote dens myself, it's really impressive how hard they are to find. So if you have a bigger backyard, honestly, unless you're really closely looking under all of your bushes, you could have one right on your property and barely even know it other than seeing the presence of coyotes. So they can very well hide themselves in these dens. Now, their gestation is around 60 days, and their average litter size is between 4 and 6 individuals. And so depending upon when the individual coyote bred, the pups are going to be born sometime between March and May. So that's coming up. Now, coyotes may defend their den area from perceived threats. And this is really the time of year when I get the most calls about coyotes and about people that are perceiving, aggressive behavior from coyotes. And most of the time it's because that person inadvertently is near the den. And I know this can be hard, right? Because maybe it's the same path that you walk your dog every morning and there hasn't been an issue. And then all of a sudden spring rolls around and you have a coyote that's not happy that you're there. And if the den is nearby, then honestly, the best advice is going to be trying to, change your route and really just leave the coyote in peace and not hassle it near its den, because it's going to be more likely to try to defend that area. They also, even as you're leaving their den area, this is where we oftentimes will have instances where coyotes will, kind of follow you a bit to see, are you actually leaving the area? They want to make sure that you're going and giving that safe space that they're looking for between you and their den site. Now, once the pups are grown up enough, and then if they either are going to stay with their parents for another year, or they may go on and disperse to try to find their own territory. Again, that's a time of year in the fall when we have dispersing individuals that are looking to establish their own territory. They're trying to find, a new place, trying to figure out where the best food sources are. And so that's where you may also have instances where suddenly coyotes are appearing where they weren't before. This could be a new individual that's trying to find its own little territory to carve out. And lastly, I do want to take a step back and try to set some expectations. I've heard in the past that there weren't coyotes that people are regularly seeing in Belvedere. And I know where I grew up as well, it's the same situation. And just in the last few years, people have really started seeing coyotes. And I do have to tell people, as long as there is available food, water, and shelter, there likely will be coyotes in your neighborhood once they've arrived. Now, maybe these individual coyotes will disappear, but inevitably, I'm sure new ones will arrive as long as there is still that food, water, and shelter. So I do think I encourage you to try to get into the mindset of accepting that, coyotes are probably going to be here to stay, and try to figure out what we can do. Because relocation and large-scale removal are not going to be possible options here in California. There are many biological, ethical, legal reasons. I could give an entire hour lecture just on, the science and the data behind relocation and large-scale removal realities. So that being said, I encourage you to really try to focus on what actions we can take to help make coyotes better neighbors, and try to, get them, prevent them from getting, more habituated, more comfortable being close to us. And setting that up, the rest of the talks tonight are going to be going over more details about what are the actions that we can be taking. But just keep in mind the biology of coyotes and how that's going to impact what we're able to do. So thank you so much. I put my email up here. I'm happy to help answer any questions. My position through UC Cooperative Extension covers the entire Bay Area. So, Sonoma all the way up or all the way down to Santa Clara County. So if I'm happy to help one-on-one, kind of troubleshoot particular situations. So if you have any questions, either about my talk or about any other wildlife species, feel free to reach out. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dr. Weitzel. I see some hands in the back. At the outset of the meeting, we identified that we'll have questions and answers for our panel of experts after all of the experts have spoken. At this point, I wanted to ask if any of our fellow council members have questions for Dr. Weitzel. Yes, Councilmember Wilkinson.
I just had a couple of quick questions. The first was, as you say, there's been years where Belvedere hasn't had any active coyote, and now we have very active coyote. How do you explain that? And can you also give some background as to the evolution of the population of coyotes in California? Sorry, could you also give some background on the evolution of the population of coyotes in California generally? Because it does seem like we're not the only city that seems to be struggling, and it seems to be an increasing problem.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm sure my colleagues at CDFW, Alex and Garrett, will also be able to chime in on this. So for California, I'll start with that first. You know, we really don't have the data on past or current coyote numbers. But I will say anecdotally, you know, I hear many stories within California of, you know, people not having seen coyotes before. And there are many different reasons for why that could be the case and why we are seeing coyotes in, you know, these residential areas. But I wish I could give you a number in terms of population or exact reasons why, but we don't know. About Belvedere specifically, given that it's an island and there are only these roads, a few roads, my understanding, that access it, I would say some of it is up to luck for which coyotes and when figured out how to access Belvedere. And once they arrived, I'm sure they looked around and realized that there was plenty of food for them to eat, and they decided to stay and, you know, set up their territory there. And as long as there is, you know, food, water, shelter, there isn't going to be a reason for them to move off. And given the geography, it would be a lot of effort. It would be difficult for them to, you know, move to a different area. So unfortunately, I think once the coyotes have arrived and set up their territory, it would be unlikely for them to leave on their own. And that's where, you know, people or cars, chance may determine, you know, how long they're going to stay.
Okay, and I had just one other question, which is, you'd said that cats and small dogs are sort of natural prey for coyotes, but we've had incidents where cats or dogs have been attacked in the direct presence of a human, which you're saying that coyotes are meant to fear. How do you explain that?
So let's see, for cats, sorry, I was looking over the incident reports. Are you talking about instances where the dog was on like a 6-foot long leash and was attacked? So that is less usual, absolutely. I would like to remind people, if the dog is off leash or even like a long retractable leash, that's not going to be within you know, the space of the person where the coyote may, you know, not want to get that close. So certainly that's for outdoor cats. Any attacks that happen there, even if it's, you know, in your property, even if it's on your porch, if it's the outdoor cat, that's really where I encourage people to keep their cats inside, because that is a natural behavior. And again, you know, keeping your dogs on a very short leash. And, you know, I think my fellow panelists will be able to give further tips on if you do have the, you know, unusual instance of a coyote continuing to approach you while you're walking your dog on a 6-foot leash or shorter. What are some of these hazing techniques you can do to prevent the coyote from going after the dog? So again, right, it's unusual. It can happen. And that's really, we want to prevent the coyotes from establishing that behavior.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have other questions for Dr. Weitzel at this time?
I have one.
Councilmember Kemister, thank you.
Thank you for being here this evening, Dr. Weitzel. Can you tell me exactly what a human wildlife interactions advisor does?
Absolutely. So I work for UC Cooperative Extension. And what Cooperative Extension is all about is combining research and outreach. And so my position is addressing the concerns and questions we have within the counties that I cover, which are 7 counties in the Bay Area, and related to any wildlife. So I work on California ground squirrels all the way up to mountain lion issues. And for my program, I do a combination of outreach and education. So talks like this, along with research. So looking at, for example, starting, working down in San Mateo County on livestock depredation by mountain lions and coyotes, as well as examining, livestock guardian dog behavior and efficacy, those sorts of questions, and how can we better use different non-lethal tools to address wildlife issues that people are facing within the Bay Area.
Thank you. Within that description, you had mentioned 3 criteria that are necessary for coyotes: food, water, and shelter. So within the brief you just described, can you tell me what advice you have given these 7 counties with regard to removal of coyote habitat and shelter in urban environments such as Belvedere? In other words, what advice have you given to these, to your constituents and clients with regard to getting rid of the dens?
So I'll split that into 2 parts: habitat versus dens. In terms of habitat, it's largely going to be focused on food and on food attractants. So that's kind of the requirement of coyotes that I encourage people to focus on. In terms of habitat, unfortunately, because coyotes are so adaptable, I mean, we have them in the cities of San Francisco and in downtown Chicago. So we're not going to be able to necessarily create an environment that's inhospitable to coyotes. They've figured out how to live within these residential areas. So what we want to do is try to alter their fine scale behavior so that they can be within a general area, but they're going to be avoiding us, and they aren't going to be overlapping with us, going after our dogs or our cats. I don't want to see coyotes comfortable sleeping on a person's patio, for example. And that's where hazing can also come in, or other non-lethal mitigation tools that we'll be discussing tonight. So that's, my talk was just kind of on the introduction. A lot of the nitty-gritty tools you'll get to hear a lot more about tonight from the other panelists. And I will say that it overlaps with what I give in my talks as well, in terms of what mitigation methods we can do and what different actions people can take themselves. Now, when we talk about dens specifically, gosh, I have to check the Fish and Game codes. I believe I'd have to check the legal rules in regards to doing anything with pups in dens. I don't encourage people to try to move dens. Once a den is, in an area, I encourage people to avoid them, to avoid that section. So let's say if it's, on a culvert or right on a sidewalk, then I would encourage people to avoid that section of the sidewalk. And I know that it's easier said than done, right? But once the end of the dunning season is there, the coyotes move on. That's when we typically see a precipitous drop in coyote complaints and conflict once we were not in the middle of the dunning season. So I would encourage people not to make their property, very attractive to a coyote wanting to choose it as a den. And that's where the techniques will be other panelists will be discussing tonight. But if a den does happen to occur, next door to you, I would just take extra precautions, try to avoid being very close to it, and be patient and know that the coyotes, they will be leaving the den within a few months.
Thank you. That was a lot of information. I just want to make sure I understand. So you don't give any advice in particular with regard to shelter for the coyotes. Is that correct?
No, the advice I give for shelter, specifically dens, so during denning season, which is a few months of the year, when there are raising pups, I would encourage people to avoid getting too close to that den.
Okay, thank you. And maybe the other experts can fill in some of the gaps. I look forward to the presentations. Thank you very much for being here.
Peter, Vice Chair Mark.
Hi, thank you so much for coming this evening. You mentioned sleeping on porches. You know, you don't see that, but you didn't see this room, but there was a lot of, people nodding their heads when you said that. If and when a coyote is sleeping on porches, in a sense, stalking animals or being present for these situations, that's certainly not normal behavior. That's not what you consider normal behavior, stalking a cat or a dog on a leash. At what point does that become repairable, for lack of a better word? Can that coyote, for lack of a better description, be rehabilitated with behavioral type of experiences as you're describing? I mean, if that happens here frequently, which it seems to be, what would you recommend, or what would you say?
So putting on my biologist hat, I do have to preface this with, there is really a lack of data on the efficacy of hazing, let's say, and the efficacy of, once a certain behavior starts, such as being on your patio, what are the odds or what is the likelihood of being able to alter that behavior? So I do have to preface what I will say with, we don't have truly the data and the research to 100% answer that. I can anecdotally give information where, when we have coyotes, for example, I'll talk about my own yard. So I have a 50-pound dog. And if the dog isn't there for a few days, we'll see coyotes in the yard. I don't allow the coyote to just hang out and chill in my yard. I do not want that behavior. I don't want the coyote to associate my yard with being able to, sleep on my porch. So that's where I do intensive hazing. And the details of that will be discussed by other panelists. I also make sure I never have any dog food outside. I don't have any water outside. I pick up all of the fruit. I really try to make it so that if a coyote is passing through my yard, they're going to go, there's nothing to really make me want to stay. I'm going to keep going. And if they do pause there, that I'm going to make it very uncomfortable for them to want to be there. So those would be my recommendations. But as an extension official, I do have to say, that is anecdotal. And there are still a lot of questions that the research community as a whole needs to, hopefully be able to answer in the future in regards to the specifics of coyote behavior.
Do we have any other questions from council of Dr. Weitzel this time? All righty. Dr. Weitzel, thank you very much. I gather you will remain for questions from our public, and thank you very much for that presentation. Robert Zadnik, who's next?
Thank you, Mayor Lynch. Next on the list, we have Garrett Allen, Unit Wildlife Biologist with Fish and Wildlife. Garrett, take it away when you're ready.
Thanks, Robert. Let me just share my screen here really quick. All right, can everybody see my title slide?
Yes.
Great. Okay, good evening, everyone. As Robert mentioned, my name is Garrett Allen, and I'm a wildlife biologist with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm also joined tonight by two of my colleagues, Dr. Alex Huron, who is our human dimensions research scientist for the department, and Haley Jones, one of our region's human wildlife conflict biologists, who will be assisting us with answering questions during the Q&A portion of tonight's meeting. The topics I'll be covering tonight during my presentation include a discussion about laws, regulations, and local ordinances. I'll also touch on the laws and regulations pertaining to trapping coyotes and how that applies to you as the homeowner. I will then address the topic of relocation and whether that's a viable option, which I know Caroline touched a little bit on, but we'll get into a little bit more detail. And then I'll conclude by discussing what to do and not do, maybe even more importantly, when encountering coyotes in your community. I'll then pass it off to Alex to introduce CDFW's Wildlife Watch program and how it can potentially help the city of Belvedere and its residents address coyote concerns within the community. All right, so I want to start off by talking about state laws and regulations as they pertain to coyotes, and then relate that to what it means to you as a homeowner. So, per Fish and Game Code, coyotes are considered a non-game mammal, which means they can be taken by any legal means. Take is defined in code as catch, capture, or kill, or attempt to catch, capture, or kill. Okay, so what does this mean for you as a homeowner who is wondering how you can protect your property, for example, your animals? So per Fish and Game Code, section 4152, you have the legal right to take a coyote that is injuring property. So if you were to let your dog out in the backyard at night to use the bathroom and coyote came out of the bushes in your yard, it went after your dog, you could take that coyote. However, residents still need to abide by other laws regarding trapping and the discharge of firearms, which I'll touch on in the next slide here. Okay, so a question we are often asked is about trapping coyotes and whether you as a homeowner are legally allowed to trap a coyote. So Fish and Game Code and California Code of Regulations Title 14 stipulate which type of traps can and cannot be used to take coyotes. It would take too long for me to really dive into exactly what type of traps those are. So I've listed the code section. So if anybody's curious, they can go in and find out exactly what type of traps can and cannot be used. But please note that the use of leg hold traps of any kind is illegal in the state of California unless a coyote is deemed a public safety animal by CDFW, and the use of leg hold traps is the only method available to protect public safety. Okay, so here's the big caveat to trapping, particularly as it pertains to homeowners. If you were to trap a coyote on your property, you can only do one of two things with that animal. You either must immediately kill the animal in the trap, or you must release the animal where the animal was trapped. And that's in code. In other words, it is illegal to trap an animal and move it elsewhere. We refer to this as relocation, and I'll get into more of the reasons why this is not a legal or effective option for getting rid of coyotes on the next slide. A couple of other important points of note. Per California Code Regulations Title 14, section 465.5, if you're going to set up a trap, it has to be checked at least once daily. And you also must receive written consent from all landowners within 150 yards of said trap. Other important note here is that if you were to successfully trap a coyote on your property, really your only method of killing the coyote at that point, as I talked about, you could release it right where you trapped it, but that's pointless. So your only method of killing the coyote at that point is through the use of a firearm. And given that it's illegal to discharge a firearm in city limits, that effectively makes it infeasible for the average homeowner to trap and kill coyotes on their property if they live in city limits. Now, if trapping is done by a resident, they must also acquire a trapping license from CFW and follow all additional trapping codes and regulations. However, the exception would be for a coyote that's causing property damage. So per Fish and Game Code section 4152, a trapping license is not required to trap a coyote that is causing property damage. However, for any trapping business performing the service for hire, they need a trapping license no matter what. Having said that, residents could elect to hire a licensed trapper to trap and lethally remove coyotes. However, I tend to caution people about trapping and lethally removing coyotes in general for several reasons. The biggest reason being that it really only provides a short-term solution and doesn't address the root of the problem, which I'll discuss shortly, and also was touched on by Carolyn about the access to attractants really being the big one. But when a coyote or coyotes are removed from area, it really effectively opens up that area for other coyotes to move in and establish its home range. So if there's attractants out on the landscape and it's vacant, other coyotes, you better bet, are going to eventually find it and move in. So again, it doesn't really address the root of the problem, which is why the coyotes came to Belvedere in the first place and have now stayed here. Again, primarily having to do with attractants being left out on the landscape, which other presenters will also probably discuss in greater detail. So really all of this said, in short, while there is some option with regards to trapping, it's an unrealistic expectation that even if a private trapper were to be successful in trapping and removing all the coyotes in Belvedere, which is probably unlikely. The coyotes are not really what we consider a trap happy species. They can be quite difficult to trap. That other coyotes wouldn't eventually find Belvedere and stick around because there's finding plenty of food and they're routinely encountering people who either act fearful or neutral to the presence of coyotes in their community, which makes the coyote in turn feel welcome and comfortable. And then other factors, which will be discussed more in detail from other presentations. There are also a number of challenges with trapping, which I kind of touched on a little bit, but such as the cost to implement a trapping program, the efficacy, as I mentioned, and that oftentimes you might even end up trapping non-target species, for example, raccoons, skunks. If you have the unfortunate case of getting a skunk in your cage or box trap and then having to try to get that guy out without getting sprayed, and sometimes even pets or feral or domestic animals. Okay, so a question we're often asked is whether the coyotes can be trapped and relocated elsewhere. So Carolyn talked a little bit about this. I'll get into a little bit more of it. And so while we understand that this is a well-intentioned ask, it's actually illegal for an individual to trap and relocate wildlife in California. And I've listed some of the code sections there that apply. And there's several reasons why, which I'll touch on a little bit now. So for starters, relocation is typically ineffective because one of a few things happens. Either the animal finds their way back home to where we moved them from, which coyotes are actually quite good at doing. It's called homing behavior. Or they end up finding another neighborhood to call their new home, which creates then a nuisance or concern for that community. So really all we're doing is just spreading the problem around from community to community. Again, not really a solution. But oftentimes what ends up happening actually, typically fairly quickly, the animal dies as a result. It can be within a matter of months even, or sooner. Coyotes are really no exception to this, and pretty frequently they get hit by cars, as Carolyn I know mentioned, potentially trying to get back home, or, again, they can get killed by another predator when unknowingly crossing into their territory, or they even sometimes can starve to death because they don't know how to effectively hunt in their new environment. I know that might sound crazy, but it's one of those things where if the only thing that it's ever known, for example, any pups that are born up in Belvedere, if you were to take them and drop them into like a really nice open space area, they're not necessarily going to know how to look for food in that environment, and very well are going to struggle and may even die as a result. These are also really the same reasons why the Department of Fish and Wildlife rarely relocates wild animals, especially not an animal like a coyote, which the public often terms a nuisance animal. So another point I like to raise about relocation is that it's very stressful for the animals, and it's even potentially dangerous for the personnel performing the work. So it's an important point I like to highlight as well. Okay, so if everything I've pretty much said and what Carolyn touched on, it's given that it's unlikely that any management action we'd be able to keep coyotes out of Belvedere forever. It's really important that people understand what to do and what not to do when they encounter a coyote. So following these actions can greatly diminish the chances of human-coyote conflict. First, I like to start with the do nots. Do not run. Running from a coyote may trigger a predatory response, causing the coyote to go after you. It also makes the coyote feel that it is the top dog, if you will, in the community, and over time, its fear of humans will likely diminish as a result. Do not bend or crouch down, and do not turn your back. Another one I need to address here, and which will be discussed in other presentations, do not feed a coyote. It is illegal to feed coyotes in California per CalCOTA regulations, Title 14, Section 251.1. Feeding is a form of harassment, as it's an intentional act that disrupts the animal's normal behavior patterns. Now, while most people who feed coyotes have good intentions, it may surprise such people to know that it is quite harmful to them. And again, at CFW, really our ultimate goal is to keep wildlife wild. And if coyotes are fed, they quickly lose their fear of humans, and this can lead to conflict. Also, something that most people don't think about, if you feed a coyote, it could be congregating animals close together, and this can help more easily spread diseases if they happen to be carrying any. So this act that may have been for good reasons for the health and welfare of the coyote might actually be really harming them. Note, if you know of anyone in your community, or you suspect anyone in your community may be feeding coyotes, please, please, please try talking to them about it if you feel comfortable. Otherwise, if that doesn't work, please report the matter to CFW or Marin Humane. Marin County actually has a specific county ordinance against the feeding of wildlife as well. Okay, moving on to the do's. Do pick up any small children or small dogs that you have with you if you encounter a coyote, for example, on a walk in your backyard, what have you. Stand as big and tall as possible. If you're wearing a jacket, go ahead and unzip it and kind of fan it out. Gives this illusion that you look a lot bigger. Wave your arms above your head. Maintain eye contact at all times. Vocalize aggressively toward the coyote. Talk aggressively, shout back off, yell. And for those who are brave enough to do so, as I sometimes tell people, I even encourage you to actually move toward the coyote while doing these things. That might sound crazy to some people, but you need to send a clear message to the coyote that you are not to be messed with, and that they need to have a healthy fear of humans and respect your space, something that they once had, but they've since forgotten, typically due to actions that we have, or lack thereof, actions that we've taken over time. Stomping can also be effective, bluff charging in the direction of the coyote, but ultimately you must keep doing these things until the coyote leaves the area entirely. So this is a little bit of what we refer to as hazing, and other speakers like Marin Humane, Project Coyote will touch more on hazing and actual things you can do to haze coyotes. It's crucial that any coyote you see in Belvedere gets hazed forcefully and persistently, with the ultimate goal that coyotes will learn to keep a safe distance from people or flee at the sight of a human. Hazing keeps coyotes and people safe, which is why we recommend it. And like Carolyn said, while we don't necessarily have data on the effectiveness of it, anecdotally speaking, effective hazing does work. So like I said, other presenters will dive more into effective hazing, what devices can be used to haze a coyote. If you want more information about hazing, you can also visit the department's website. You could search the term Wildlife Watch and then look for the coyote hazing techniques PDF link on our website. And there's some good information in there as well. Okay. Lastly, in the unlikely event that a coyote was to make contact with a human, and by contact, we're really referring to a bite or a scratch on a human which directly causes injury, the first thing you should do is call your local police department and then seek medical attention. Then local PD will work with CFW and investigate such incidents on a case-by-case basis. One final important note, CFW's law enforcement division, so think about our local wardens and lieutenants, they're the ultimate authority among CDFW to determine whether a coyote is a public safety threat or not. However, outside of CFW, local law enforcement also has the authority to declare a public safety incident and act accordingly. And now I will pass it over to Alex to talk about our Wildlife Watch program.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I would like to thank Garrett and our other speakers for all the excellent information. I also wanted to acknowledge the help of Haley Jones, who is a human wildlife conflict specialist in the Bay Delta area, as well as I think we have on locale John Kraus, who is a supervisor for the Bay Delta area of CFW. So again, wanted to thank all the CFW folks for all the work they put towards the presentation, as well as we'd like to thank the other speakers. We know that this is definitely a very important topic. It's we know that people have strong feelings, and that we're probably not going to come up with a solution tonight that's going to work for everyone. Again, these are complex problems, but what we want to do is provide information and resources about different tools and options that are available for the city. One of the programs that we have is called Wildlife Watch. This is a community engagement program around coyotes and other wildlife. Part of it is focused on training city volunteers to help remove some of these attractants that we've been talking about. Again, the folks who are attending this meeting, very likely you're already doing all of these activities. The issue is that perhaps not all of your neighbors or not everyone in your city is engaging in these behaviors, and some folks might need help either knowing why it's important to do these remove attractants, or how to go about doing it. So one of the things that we help is training city volunteers to help remove attractants, and also how to perform hazing, as Garrett and Carolyn mentioned, and some of the other speakers will talk about. Hazing is not easy. A lot of times it's to be effective, it takes a considerable experience with hazing coyotes. So that's one of the options that we offer, is helping train city volunteers how to perform that. We also advise cities, governments on how to report coyote incidents to CFW, how to develop a wildlife management plan, and how to collaborate with other agencies, whether that is some of the folks here tonight on the call, or other state and federal and local agencies throughout the state of California. As was mentioned, these aren't, Belvedere is not alone in this situation. There's a lot of other communities that are dealing with issues around coyotes and wildlife. Wildlife Watch has been used throughout several communities in Southern California to help address some of the issues that they've been having. That being said, we know that Belvedere is unique. Not only is it the culture and the people are unique, but also just the geography of the city. So one of the goals is, again, making sure to take these information, wildlife management plans, and use it to adapt it to your city, so that it's a solution that works for the city. So we've already had a lot of great conversations with Chief Wu and your city manager, Mr. Zanuck, and we look forward to discussing some of these items more. And thank you for joining us for this. Again, this is we know it's a issue that people have a lot of feelings about. So I think it's a great step to start engaging in dialogue and discussion about how we can help address some of these issues. With that, I think we'll pause for any questions from the City Council before moving on to the next speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Heron. Do we have any questions from council at this time for Dr. Heron or Mr. Allen? Yes. Councilmember Wilkinson.
I just have a couple of questions around sort of legal definitions. What is the definition of a public safety animal?
So for our definition for California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the definition that our law enforcement division uses is if it's a bite or a scratch on a human being.
So when you say that our local law enforcement can make that judgment, it has to be on the basis of that definition you've just given.
That is the definition that the CFW uses, that when our wardens would respond. Again, the local law enforcement, they may have a different definition that they can respond if depending on what their definition of a public safety incident is. The one from CFW, from when we respond to it as a public safety incident, that's the definition that we use in CFW.
Okay, and the second question I had was, if a homeowner, seems very unlikely, but has success in trapping a coyote in a box trap, can our local police force shoot that coyote?
If that would be a legal method to take, it would be depending on whether the city police department is able to do that or offer that option.
Great, thank you so much.
Mayor Lynch?
Thank you. Yes.
I have a question for Mr. Allen. Is it possible to go back to the do's and don'ts screen for just a moment? And
Yeah, let me pull it back up.
if you're, while you're doing that, I'll ask my question. And thank you very much for being here, and to both of you for engaging already with our city manager and our police. The question of hazing is something that is really confusing to people. And what concerns me is that we don't want to give a false sense of security. Let me give you the context. Belvedere is an age-friendly city recognized by the WHO. And that is in part because it is estimated that based on the recent census, half of our households have someone 60 or older living in the household. And so when the do's are to pick up small children and dogs, it occurs to me that our many residents that are about 5 feet tall and weigh about 110 pounds don't have anyone to pick them up. So, which pretty closely includes me. So I'm looking at this list of things that I should do at dawn or dusk when walking around. If I were to encounter, not if, but when I encounter a coyote. And I want to make sure that these instructions don't give me a false sense of security, nor our other residents who might not be as brave as me. So this is a really important issue for Belvedere, and I would just want to know what we should do in the context of our own demographic.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that if you don't have the physical capabilities of picking up a small child or your dog, for example, that's on a leash close by to you, I would try to position them behind you. So position yourself in front and then do all those other things that were mentioned. Especially for the more elderly community, we recommend walking with things like a walking stick, a cane, a golf club. All these things can be used to defend oneself in the unlikely event a coyote were to try to come up to you. People can even, use things like air horns, potentially could be effective. A shaker can, which is basically you just take an aluminum can, you cut the top off the aluminum can, you fill it with coins or some other material that when you shake it really hard, it makes a really loud noise. And this noise can be really, really quite effective at getting a coyote to back off. And so those are just some of the things that I recommend for, especially anybody can do this, but especially for, those who are more physically unable to do some of the things like, charging after a coyote or picking up a small child or a dog that's with you. So, positioning your body in front and then using some of those techniques that we talked about. Really, there's so many different things that you can do to haze a coyote. I could go on and on and on for a lot of time. We could even have a whole separate meeting just to talk about hazing, effective hazing techniques and whatnot.
Yeah, as Garrett said, that is some of the training that we offer through our Wildlife Watch, is helping communities learn how to do the hazing. And for another option is, again, if you're perhaps for folks who are a bit of a smaller stature, having an umbrella can also be useful to expand the umbrella, make it look large. But like Garrett mentioned, if we will only recommend to perform the hazing if you feel that you can safely do it. So if it's a resident who does not feel that they're it would be physically safe for them to haze. In that case, we again recommend to back away, don't turn their back, but not necessarily to do anything that they would feel unsafe or uncomfortable doing. That's one of those things when I'm talking about the Wildlife Watch program is that these options that Garrett mentioned work well for some communities, but Belvedere is unique. So that's an option is if the city is interested in pursuing a program such as Wildlife Watch, is developing that so that we match it to your city's demographics. So perhaps maybe having a local team of folks hazing coyotes that are trained and able to do so, as opposed to having all residents do it. So that is something that I definitely feel that is a very important point, and something that we definitely we'll be happy to help discuss with the city more if there's interest.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Vice Mayor Mark.
Yeah, just a quick one, Mr. Allen. You mentioned earlier about firearm discharge laws, and you spoke more about trapping, but relating to that, clearly law enforcement officers and CFW agents have the authority to discharge a weapon. I'd like your comments on that, as well as, are private contractors allowed to discharge weapons? Is there any license or authorization, deputization that would allow that?
Yeah, good question. So my comment about firearms is really pertaining more to local ordinances than it does so much as to state regulations. Obviously, state regulations has their limitations, how far away you have to be from a dwelling, etc. But given the fact with Belvedere, everyone's in city limits, that really comes down to a local code issue, whether local code allows homeowners to discharge firearm or not. Obviously, local police can do that. CDFW can do that if absolutely need be. Though typically with CDFW, their preference would be to, if they were going to actually go in and remove a coyote that they've identified as a public safety threat, they would tend to want to capture that coyote first, take it to a safe location, and then dispatch it.
And have you had an experience with, you mentioned private contractors for trapping? Would they have that ability?
That's a good question. Alex, do you know the answer to that?
So that would depend again what the city laws are for discharge firearm. If they will allow the private contractors to do it, and it varies with each city. So that's one of those. It's not a state law. So I would we can't really speak to what I'm uncertain what the exact laws are for the city or county.
Any other questions? Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you. Thanks again for coming. We heard a lot about hazing tonight, and I'm assuming we'll probably hear that word used again and again with the other presenters. But one of the questions I have, and I'm sure others do, is once a coyote has already shown to be aggressive by going into someone's yard or moving toward someone with walking their dog, you don't have any data on how much the hazing could actually change that behavior, do you?
No, we do not have data on that. I do sometimes anecdotally, if I can, and people I've talked to who have told me about coyote concerns in their communities who have tried various hazing techniques, I do offer to them, I say, hey, if you try something on coyote on your next walk, write me back, let me know how it worked. And most of the time I don't hear from people. So I don't know if they implemented it or just didn't, we're too busy to get back to me. So that's kind of really where the buck stops for us, obviously, and knowing, whether or not hazing is truly effective. Anecdotally, like Carolyn mentioned, and like I'll mention, I know that hazing can work, but it takes it may take a very particular individual. It takes a lot of forceful hazing. It takes persistence. It takes perseverance. The most important thing, most people that try to haze an animal, they'll do it for a little bit. And what the coyote might do is they might take a few steps away they'll stop, they'll turn around and look at the person, and the person then goes, oh, well, that didn't work, I'm going to just stop. And so really what we try to encourage people is that's, really, if you're gonna go ahead and say, yeah, I want to haze coyotes in my neighborhood, I'm going to do it forcefully and persistently. You've got to really, the big key is you have to continue hazing that individual animal until it completely leaves the area. And we're hoping that after a period of time, it kind of gets trained in a way to go, well, every time I'm around people, I get really forcefully and persistently hazed. Therefore, I'm going to keep my distance. And that's really the ultimate goal we're hoping for here.
There are a few studies underway in Southern California, including one being done by Dr. Whitesell's counterpart with an extension in Southern California, looking at the effects of hazing to try to collect more quantitative data, but those are still underway and the results are not completed yet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have a question, Mr. Allen, first for you. And you referred us to sections 3003 and 4004 regarding trapping rather than walk us through that. And I think I appreciate why that's true because I've tried to go through them and they're pretty messy, to be candid, particularly when you get into the regs that follow those statutes. But let me just ask you this question. Is the use of a conibear trap for a coyote, is that lawful?
Oof, you're asking me to know something very specific about code that I don't have code right in front of me. Alex, do you happen to know the answer to that question offhand? Otherwise, I could look it up and get back to you.
Okay.
So that one would be better for us to look up because there are several types of different kind of bear traps. So I just don't want to give out a wrong answer. So we can look that up and get back with the correct answer. We can even if we have to we'll contact our folks in the regulations department.
I appreciate that
CFW.
thank you. I appreciate that very much. I think it would be very useful because our materials tonight include a number of the statutes and regulations, and it's not the least bit clear, at least to me, what is permissible in terms of the forms of traps. If we could get, it would be really helpful, I think, if we could get from you guys a list of the acceptable types of traps, just so we have that information, because trying to glean it from these materials is quite tricky. I wanted to ask about the regulation 465.5, Mr. Allen, the use of traps. You referred to the need, if you do trap an animal, to either release it or to shoot it. But the way the regulation reads is it says, unless released, trapped animals shall be killed by shooting where local ordinances and safety permit. It doesn't say what you can do where local ordinance and safety don't permit. In other words, it doesn't say that's the only way to kill a trapped animal. And the regulation goes on to say public employees can use chemical euthanasia to dispatch a trapped animal. And so let me start with that. It's correct, I assume, that this means what it says, that local government employees can use chemical euthanasia to dispatch a trapped animal. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And
Yes.
is there any other restriction on the methods that can be used to immediately kill a trapped coyote?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so this would be for state allow, it'd be by any legal means. So essentially, I mean, any humane way. So pretty much any way that is, with the exception of poison, you get discharge firearm using non-lead ammunition or chemical discharge. I believe CO2 is also an option for some if allowed by the city and by the local pest control operator. So again, the reason why that part in the codes and the local law about local ordinances is because we don't have the authority to tell someone to use a method that is illegal for their city or their county. So that's why we'll probably have to defer some of the questions about other techniques to the folks in your local ordinances or county ordinances program.
Thank you. And my next question, I think, is for you, Dr. Heron. You referred to wildlife management plans. And to my knowledge, I don't think the city of Belvedere has one in place. Is that right, Mr. Zadnik?
Not yet.
Yeah. So my question for you, Dr. Huron, is can you give us just a sense for what it takes for a city like us to take what I presume are existing materials from CFW, modify them for our needs and implement a wildlife management plan?
Yeah, and that's a great, fantastic question. The short answer is that it should be fairly easy. So again, you guys have already done a lot of the work of gathering materials. I know. Robert Zendig is working on compiling some of the materials and providing information. So it's pretty much a manner of we can work with your city management or city manager's office to get a plan built out. We can provide, because we have the wildlife expertise and experience working with other cities, we can sort of help guide that process. And then after that, it's just a matter of having it, the city getting it approved through the city council and getting it on, getting everything approved on the website.
Thank you. And my next question is, and I won't hold you to this answer, but if you happen to know, does implementing a wildlife management plan require CEQA review?
So that will depend on what is in the management plan. So for some cities, it has in Southern California that have decided to have parts of their plan. For example, some cities have decided to have a larger trapping program or effort. Those often do go through CEQA. If a lot of it though is management plan is oftentimes just putting on paper what a lot of the processes and policies are already in place, which those would not require CEQA.
Thank you very much. If there are no other questions, Vice Mayor Mark.
Yeah, I'm sorry. One quick follow-up, Mr. Allen. You talked about the efficacy of trapping or the lack thereof. Could you comment on that? I had a conversation with a municipality in Massachusetts that's facing a similar issue, and they quoted a USDA Wildlife Services representative who they've trapped 3 coyotes in 10 years in their local area. Not very effective at all. Can you comment on that if you don't mind?
Yeah, there's a number of, if you comb through the literature, which I've spent some time doing, it really just depends on what traps are being done. It depends on the location. There's just so many factors that play into it. In some instances, trapping can be quite effective. In other instances, it might be very ineffective. Typically, again, because leg hold traps historically were quite effective at capturing coyotes. However, in California, obviously, it's illegal to use that unless, for example, departments or another agencies deemed it a public safety threat. So typically what most often used is like cage or box traps. And coyotes are just generally pretty weary about trying to enter those type of traps. And so it may or may not be, you might put a lot of effort into trapping, kind of like you talked about, and get very little result from it.
Mayor Lynch, one quick
Yes,
follow-up.
please.
I'm sorry. And this is a question for either one of you. And thank you very much for your knowledge about the code sections. If you look at section 4152, where it says that non-game mammals found to be injuring crops or property may be taken at any time. If it were found that there were a sufficient number of coyote activity, sufficient number of coyotes and sufficient amount of activity in digging the dens and creating the shelter on unstable hillsides, is that something that would be considered injuring property if it's public property that is where hazards are caused by the activity of the coyotes?
Yeah, so it would depend on the extent of the damage. Oftentimes, that damaging property is referring to loss of domestic animals, but damaging to the property itself or the soil, that can count as damage to property but again, it would sort of depend on the extent of the excavation and the digging.
Certainly, that's very helpful. Thank you for your patience.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Allen. Dr. Huron, I really appreciate your help and thank you for sticking around for questions from our community at the end of these presentations. Appreciate it very much. Mr. Zadnik, are we moving to David Stepp and Kelly Hendricks?
Yes, we are. Dave, whenever you're ready, I'll let you take it from here.
Hi, how you doing? Dave Stepp, Marin Humane. We're basically touching on a lot that was said already tonight. First, what Marin Humane would respond to. We respond to calls such as attacks to animals or people or bites to animals and people. Also, if there is a strong aggression that the coyote would not haze to get away from you. So that's what we respond to. That being said, excuse me, we only have one officer on duty from 8 p.m. to say 9 a.m. in the morning. During the day, we have more officers. A lot of times we would refer, if it's that late at night, we would refer to Belvedere PD to respond. We would also be responding, but our time of response would be extended to the distances that we have to travel. So what our goal is, we always want to talk about hazing when we get calls. I know we've talked about hazing all night long, but agree with everybody. The idea or the goal is to make a coyote not want to be around a human. If they see a person walking, we want them to turn around and go the other way, because they're going to get yelled at, shouted at, chased. Coyotes, it's already been said, they're intelligent and opportunistic, and they know how far you will chase them, and they will stop that distance. And if you start walking the other way, they might follow you, but you have to continue to try to haze them. We also like to tell people pet safe. We talked about it, about keeping your dog or your pet on a leash. Your dog's on a leash, and the leash should be no longer than 6 feet in length. The flexi leads that allows a dog to go out 15, sometimes even longer. It's really hard to pull the dog in, and also hard to control the dog. Even small dogs, even a large dog. Large dogs, we like to have them sitting by your legs, so it actually makes you look bigger when you have a larger dog next to you, puffing up your jacket and trying to stand tall. Walking sticks are really good to have when we're talking about hazing. I don't think it was mentioned earlier, but cats. Marin Humane likes to take a stance on cats. Don't need to be outdoors. Coyotes don't think as people. Coyotes look at cats as food. That's a food source. They're not a pet to them. And there's a lot of other things, not just wildlife, that are a danger to cats, cars, other animals, people. So it's always safer to have your cat. If you want the cat to have the luxury of outdoors, the little cat condos or catteries that allow them to come indoors and outdoors are really good to have. We touch bases on, don't run, don't crouch, don't turn your back. One of the things I've learned recently are garbage bags, large, like garbage bags you can just put in your back pocket, like the ones going in your trash can. By shaking those up and down like you're trying to fill them up with air, that makes a loud noise, and coyotes tend to move away from that. They don't know what that is. It scares them, so they'll go the other distance. We talked about shaker cans. Shaker cans work. air horns. I started to talk about walking sticks. When the hazing, coyotes will run about 30 feet from you, even closer. And I don't think anybody's talked about any successions that we've had. Marin Maine, we get called on to go to help assist in hazing sometimes, especially the more aggressive animals will come out. And I can say that every one of the techniques that we use that was spoken tonight do work, especially on a habitual animal that continues to go in the same spot. It takes a while. It takes a little bit to get to them. It also to a point to where when our trucks, they've come to recognize our trucks, and they know when we pull up, they're already running, because they know the next thing that's going is we're going to get out and we're going to start running after them. We're going to chase them. So it does work. And the whole thing is to make them feel as uncomfortable as possible as you can. Also feeding, either purposely or inadvertently feeding them. We talked about leaving water bowls outside for your own animals, food bowls for your own animals, picking up fruit that may have fallen in your thing. Birdseed is a big thing about the squirrels coming in and picking them. So they're attracted to the rats, who are attracted to the seeds. So that also brings them in. I had one more. So that's about all I have. Kelly, if you want to touch base on anything that I have not talked about.
Oh, it says the video host has stopped my video. Can you start my video?
Can we bring in Ms. Hendricks?
What's that? The video host stopped my video at the beginning, so he just needs to hit it. So it'll start up again.
I think we're working on that.
Oh, okay, great.
Are we able to get that going?
We're working on that, Jim. Give us just a minute.
Why Kelly's working on that? I just.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, you got it. Good.
Oh, go ahead.
I
Go
was just going
ahead,
to say one more. We talked about local ordinances. There are the county does have a feeding wildlife feeding ordinance that our officers do cite for. We investigate and we do cite throughout the county for people who are purposely feeding wildlife. We do warn about accidentally feeding. A lot of people don't understand that they can't feed the wildlife. There was a talk about GGNRA had a coyote problem. We actually have coyotes. We get response out there that people are purposely going to stores and bringing food just to feed the coyotes out of the GGNRA property. And also, we have coyotes that will stop traffic by Stinson Beach because people throw out food for them. It's a learned behavior that they get. They know what people do. And the best thing we have to talk about is don't feed them. And it's the better thing to do. It'll save them a little bit more, and it'll save pets and people from being harassed from them. All right, Kelly.
Okay. Oop. Let me go back. Hang on a second. I think I messed that up. Let me see. Is that playing? Can you guys see that?
We can see it.
Oh, great. Okay. So real quickly, I'm just going to, oh, it's not advancing. Okay.
It doesn't appear to be now.
Let me try one more thing.
She hasn't.
Can you guys see the screen?
Not yet, Kelly.
Okay, let me see how I can get out of this. Okay. Let me try screen
Can I just
sharing
ask
one more
our
time.
audience who's here to please be a little bit patient? We're going to get to questions right after this. I understand. We're going to get to questions very shortly, and I appreciate your patience. Ms. Hendricks,
Oh, great. I think it's working now, right?
we can see the screen, but it doesn't appear to be advancing.
There it
Can
goes.
you see it? Okay, you can see it?
We can see it.
Okay, well, anyways, I'm just going to quickly tell you about Project Coyote for those of you that don't know. We're a nationwide nonprofit based in Marin County, and our mission is to help people and wildlife coexist using education, science, and advocacy. And although coyotes are a flagship species, we advocate for all of North America's predators. So I'm going to tell you quickly about me because I think that my background gives me a unique perspective on these issues. My husband and I are cattle ranchers. We live on a ranch where my husband's managed the cow-calf operation for over 25 years. And over the years, we've raised thousands of calves successfully around mountain lions, coyotes, all sorts of predators without the use of any lethal controls. In addition, I'm a longtime volunteer with Sonoma County Wildlife Rescue, where I foster wild babies every year until they can be released. And I'm a vice president of Little Trooper Ranch. We're a nonprofit dog rescue, and we get small dogs out of bad situations and adopt them out to loving homes. So, and I'm also on the Sonoma County Fish and Game Commission. So the reason why I mention this is because sometimes when I do these coyote talks, people think, oh, you just care about coyotes. But the truth is I care about pets, I care about livestock, and sometimes even people. So they're all the animals are important to me. I just feel like as humans, it's our duty to try to not only be good stewards of our pet and livestock, but also the wildlife that lives amongst us. So we've touched upon this a lot tonight, and that is that feeding wildlife is a huge problem. And I think we've discussed the things like bird feeders and not leaving out your pet food and the fruit trees and all that kind of things. But one thing I want to mention is that these feral cat colonies can be a problem. I know that there's people that feed them, and that's great, but when they're fed on the ground, it can be a huge wildlife attractant. And it's often a lot of the sources of coyote conflicts come, and there's feral cat colonies, feeders in the area. So what we try to encourage people to do, if you're a feral cat colony watcher, is to use this design like that's shown on the bottom left of the screen, which is a raised platform to feed them on. It's safer for the cats and it's better for wildlife. And that apron you see on the bottom, that aluminum apron, is to keep raccoons from accessing it. But almost every situation where a coyote has come into conflict, when it's traced back, it can always be traced back to a coyote that's been fed by humans. So this study, it was done in Rhode Island, where they collared coyotes, and it really drives the point home about how devastating feeding can be when it comes to coyote conflicts. So they collared coyotes, and they found that these pings you see at the top, in the top illustration, are hot points where the coyotes were gathering, and there was a lot of conflicts in those areas. So when the scientists went and did some exploration, they discovered that there was feeders at both those big hot spots that you see in those two big dots right there and there. So they cited the people, they cited the feeders, they told them why it was bad to feed the coyotes and got them to stop. And 2 weeks later, the bottom shows how few pings. I think there was one ping after 2 weeks. So it drives the point home that the single most effective way to remove coyotes, if you don't want them around, is to remove attractants. So we've talked a lot tonight about hazing, and I'm gonna just go over it quickly again.
Kelly, we can probably. Okay, can we have a little bit of order and decorum here, please? Can I ask everyone to have a little bit of order, please, so we can get through this? If you guys can't sit through a 2-hour meeting, we're never going to solve a coyote problem. Kelly, can I ask you to pass the hazing and move on to whatever your next topic is, please? Because I think we've covered that fully.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, avoiding conflicts on walks.
I think we can
So
skip
le-
this one too.
Okay, you want to skip that one?
Respectfully,
Okay.
thank you.
This one's important, especially for Belvedere. So I'm going to go over this one, okay? And that is securing yards. So there's back in the day, it was maybe hard to keep your yard safe from coyotes, but now we got some amazing products that really can do a great job. One is coyote rollers, and they are roll bars that you can install on the top of a fence. It should be at least 6 foot tall fence. And they're roll bars you can put on the top of the fence. And when animals jump a fence, you don't see it sometimes. It happens so fast, you don't always see it with your eyes, but they touch it with their paws, either the front paws or the back paws. These will roll the animal back off the fence so they can't get over. They're also great for keeping dogs and cats in yards. So it's just an amazing product for that. And if you have animals that can possibly dig under, there's a product called Dig Defense, which is galvanized steel bars. Back in the day, we used to have to trench around the bottom of fences, but now you can just hammer in these underneath your fence line and it'll keep animals from digging under. And again, David mentioned the Catios, and they are a spectacular way to keep your cat safe if you want it to have outdoor access. And they can be as deluxe. If you Google Catios, you can see examples of the most fancy ones you've ever can imagine to some humble ones like this one shown in this photograph. And it's a great way to keep your cat safe while allowing them outdoor access. Another thing I like to suggest is that if you have a fence line, try to make it so either by attaching shade cloth or somehow make it where it's not visible. So when your pets are outside, an animal can't see in. Mountain lions and coyotes generally don't like to jump into yards where they can't see easily a way out. And also you don't want, once a predator gets an eye on sees an animal through the fence, it's harder to repel the attack. So those are some great ways to keep your yards really safe and keep your pets in yards and wildlife out. This is just a short video. This isn't the brand Coyote Roller, but it's a product. This is one in Australia, I think. Same, to show you how it works. So it gives you an idea of how those products work. It's a really, really great invention. And you can make them, you can do it yourself out of PVC pipe if you want. Go to YouTube, they have all kinds of directions how to do it. I just want to finish up by saying it's important to remember that perspective is important. I know for a lot of you, this is the first time you've had to deal with coyotes, so it's very scary and there's an adjustment period, but has just for some perspective, coyotes bite on average every year in North America, in all of North America, a couple of dozen people. In comparison, dogs bite every year in just the US, 4.5 million people. And most of the coyote bites are very superficial. A lot of the dog bites, they spend, I think 1,000 people a day go to emergency rooms for dog bites. I don't tell you this because I don't want you to like dogs or to be scared of dogs. We love dogs. I love dogs. It just has a form of comparison. And vehicles kill 6 million pets a year. In fact, when vets say what their most common reason that pets are admitted, the number one is ingested in foreign objects. Number two is hit by cars. 3 is defensive bite wounds from dogs and cat fight wounds. So wildlife attacks aren't even on the radar. It's just a lot more rare than people think. And I know when you first have some pets get taken by coyotes, it's very scary, but honestly, off-leash dogs and cars are probably a far greater threat to both humans and wildlife, or your pets.
Thank you, Ms. Hendricks. And thank you also, Mr. Stapp. Do we have questions for either of these experts from council? Not seeing any. I do have one question for you, Mr. Stapp. Does Marin Humane either collect or have access to any data in Marin related to the activity levels of coyotes? In other words, sightings, attacks, that kind of thing?
We have recently started collecting data. We were doing not on coyote. We weren't doing coyotes until recently. We were doing more of mountain lion sightings, which we don't hit that many of at all. But we have recently started doing coyote sightings, mainly for problem coyotes that are sick or injured. We have one that's in Corte Madera, Larkspur area that has really bad mange. But we can't get anywhere near it, and they don't go into traps very easily. So we're just monitoring him. Other than that, I was impressed with Belvedere PD's stats. We didn't have any of that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you both, Mr. Staff and Ms. Hendricks, for your time. And I appreciate you sticking around for any questions from our community that are directed to you and the other on our panel of experts. So with that, I want to thank all of our experts, and I want to invite public comment. When you come forward, please state your name and address, and confine your remarks to 3 minutes. Whoever's first. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Sweeney Paul. Do you want to put the mic up there, Robert, or is that one working?
There we go.
Right now.
Hi, Ben Paul, 108 Golden Gate. So from the experts' perspective, obviously we've heard a lot today about, what not to do. We've heard that hazing may or may not work. I think from this community, obviously my wife Tracy Paul started a petition that has close to 400 signatures from Belvedere residents that are very concerned about this issue and want the coyotes removed. But I think I would have liked to hear from our experts a much clearer explanation of how we deem if we do have truly aggressive coyotes in our area. The USDA has clear guidance around this that has been adopted by Mercer Island and other communities that have taken action here. But I'd like to turn it over to the experts and try to get some better guidance aside from that we have to wait for a human being to be attacked, because I don't think I'm, after having my dog attacked, that I'm willing to wait for my child to be attacked or someone else in the community to be attacked. So do you subscribe to the USDA? Do you have other guidance for us around that?
And Mr. Allen, that sounds like it might be a question directed to you.
Yeah, so we touched a little bit on how those are all great questions. And I can personally say that I know that if I was walking my dog and it got attacked by a coyote, I'd be pretty freaked out too. So I don't want to take this lightly. And so what I would say is that just to remind people that CDFW's law enforcement division is really the ultimate authority for within CDFW that determines whether a coyote is a public safety threat or not. We define public safety threat coyotes as those who cause, either a bite or scratch that inflict injury to a human. Typically, in my experience, those are coyotes that are actively seeking a human and looking to inflict injury upon that human. Now, sometimes we've had it where someone's walking their dog on a leash, could be an extended leash, could be, what have you. The coyote targets the dog specifically, and its natural human tendencies to want to intervene between their dog and the coyote. And as a result, sometimes they get bit or scratched. So those get really tricky. Those are really tricky situations. I'm glad I don't have to make those calls, whether a coyote is a public safety threat or not. Again, it really resides with our law enforcement division making those calls. And I would say I'll defer to Alex if there's anything, Alex or Haley, if you guys have anything you want to add.
I think Garrett covered it from CFW side. So again, yeah, we for CFW within the department, we do all of our law enforcement division has the jurisdiction over any public safety incident. If the I know some cities choose to like you mentioned, some communities have adopted other guidelines. And that is something that could be a part of a community or a wildlife management plan if the city was interested in adopting or developing their own set of guidelines. And we'd be happy to work with the city to, based on our experiences with other cities, what's worked for other cities, and I'll provide that experience. But that would be again, that would have to be a decision that the city made, since we don't have the jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Brian Davis from West Shore.
Hey, Brian.
A couple quick things. I want to say thank you to the council for having the meeting. I want to say thank you to the experts for being here. I want to say thank you to Tracy and Ben for starting the petition. And I want to say thank you to the 200 people that were either on Zoom or in the room, because without all that, we're not getting anything done. Two things missing from tonight, which I want to figure out how we get. The first is Belvedere specific information. Loved all the information you all presented. We don't have feral cats and we don't have people feeding coyotes. We had a massive,
Are you sure about that?
massive raccoon. We had a massive deer population and a massive raccoon population. They're now all dead. Our trees like it, and our trash cans like it, but now our pets are endangered by the coyotes. That's my interpretation. I suspect it's a lot of other people's. But we need to figure out how true that is, and if that's part of the problem here. I love that everybody has this information. No one's visited the island. They don't know the demographics. They haven't done the thermal imaging. There's a lot of stuff that we can do for Belvedere specific, and I want to understand how to get that done. The second thing is there's another side to the story. Ben alluded to it. The USDA the Department of Agriculture from the United States has a wildlife services. They have a 7-point plan with coyotes on severity or aggressiveness. They say aggressiveness goes down or goes up. It doesn't go down. So once you get to 0.5, they're not going back to 0.1. They're going down to 0.7. 0.5 is attacking animals when people are present, and they recommend killing the coyotes when we reach that level. We have reached that level in Belvedere. It's happened on Mercer Island. It's happened in Massachusetts. It's happened, do a Google search. It's happened in a lot of different places. The beauty of this situation, not that it's beautiful at all, but like we're like, nothing's unique here. We have our own special circumstances because of the roads and the topography and West Shore and a bunch of things. But like by and large, other people have dealt with this and have been dealing with it for a while. And we need to learn from that quickly, right? And while this is a good start, and I appreciate everyone sitting through 2.5 hours of it, we need to move to the next steps, in my opinion, very quickly. And before my last 45 seconds is up, I would say just from my research, we need to do two things. The first is we need to get rid of the current aggressive coyotes, right? They need to be taken out, full stop. Coyotes will likely replace and come back, but that's where the longer term plan comes into place. All the hazing, all the sticks, the golf clubs, the garbage cans, all that stuff, that's fine. We need to educate our community on how to do that sort of stuff so that the coyotes that replace the current coyotes don't become quote unquote domesticated or habituated like the ones we have now. So it's a two-step plan, aggressive in the beginning and a longer term. And with that, my time is up. Thank you, guys.
Brian, can I just ask you before we move on? I just want to get a clarifying question from you, Brian, if I may. What would be your suggestion about how to eradicate the current population of aggressive coyotes? Can you come back to the microphone, please? Thank you.
I personally think they need to be shot. Trapping doesn't work. The types of traps that work we're not allowed to use. So box traps, by and large, are the types we're allowed to use, and those do not work. So if we want to start trapping tomorrow legally with the box traps and see if it works, I'd be down for that in a heartbeat. But while we figure out the snipers need to come in and shoot them. Right on Mercer Island, almost exactly a year ago, they took out 2 super aggressive coyotes. USDA Wildlife Services came in. They literally set up, I mean, it was a military type operation. They literally set up a corridor where they could be shot. They brought them in with coyote calls between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, and they killed them both.
So just to clarify, the proposal is that we investigate working with USDA to use their team.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's what I need to know. I appreciate that.
And let me clarify my clarification. I was surprised at this meeting that wasn't represented. I would have thought USDA Wildlife Services that kill over 70,000 coyotes a year, right? Because of they're a nuisance pest, would have had some representation at a meeting like this.
Thank you.
That's my.
Appreciate it.
Hi, I'm David Likas of Centerville Avenue, and I've been living on the Tiburon Peninsula continuously for 63 years. I have never known of a coyote problem here. Has anybody else? No. And we're on a peninsula and the staff left off. We're very difficult to access. There's only one way in, one way out, and we're a very safe community. These coyotes, if we eliminate them now, they're not coming back. And how many of you have seen the video of the attack on the child in Woodland Hills? Everybody at home, you must Google chalk on child Woodland Hills. That's left out. And another thing the panel left out, how many deaths have been eaten by coyotes in the United States? It happens. I found 2 cases. And I think elimination is a really good way. And as far as data points, is that how you call it? Data point? I live with a 9-year-old woman. She likes to garden. I live on a large lot on the lagoon with a lot of frontage, and it's so big, we have a beach. And Saturday night, I heard the barking. I was so close, I couldn't be in. I went out. I turned on the floodlights. There were 2 50-pound coyotes 20 feet in front of me. My mother likes to go out and water at night. I opened up the gate. They didn't back down. One of them even took a step forward, and I shut the door. So you have a new data point. I think you guys need to take action. Or if someone gets killed, it's going to be on your bid. And one thing to make clear, it is legal to shoot a predator on your property. And what, Mayor, what's the fine for, or Officer Wu, what's the fine for discharging a firearm? Is it illegal?
Pursuant to the Belvedere Municipal Code, it is illegal to discharge a firearm, and I am not certain on the fine.
I read it for 3 hours tonight. It says it's prohibited and it's confiscation. So, you know, illegal, we don't want to, people, I'm not encouraging that, but you guys need to do something to take them out. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Likas. Let me just reiterate that I think it's helpful to recognize that this council and City Hall is very receptive to the need to take action, additional action beyond what we've done already. I don't think anyone in this room needs to be persuaded that we need to explore all available options. The purpose of this meeting is to do exactly that, to explore them and to understand the input from both the experts and from the people in this room. So I appreciate very much all of the input. I certainly appreciate the passion. It doesn't surprise me, but I think if the comments can be directed to helping us understand what this group thinks is the best options that we have available to us, that's the most productive use of our time. Thank you.
My name is Don Jesberg. I live on Centerville Avenue. I first moved to Belvedere in 1961, so I can't do the math, whether you've been here longer than I have. But I just want to say that they have eliminated the raccoons and the skunks and a lot of the deer. That's kind of the benefit. But if you think about it, if you take Carolyn Whitesell's comment that the only predator is mountain lions, when are 2 lucky mountain lions going to find their way across our little streets and take out the coyotes? And then we've got a bigger problem. So we do need to eliminate the problem now while it's still doable. I can tell you I've had more than 10 encounters. I've had my dog and a coyote in a fight. I've had that same coyote follow me with a paired up coyote and a third on hill all the way down West Shore Road. I felt uncomfortable. And it's time to have action. And I believe the elimination of them by shooting is probably the most humane way to do it and the most sound way to accomplish it. That's my opinion. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jesper.
Hey, everyone. Get to the mic. My name is Laura Gillespie, and I grew up in Belvedere, and I'm living in the house I grew up in. So I won't give you my age, but it's a really long time that I've either lived here or been around my parents who lived here. The point I want to make is that I have a 100-pound dog. he got into a scuffle with a coyote and nearly had to have a total hip replacement because, yeah. And this was in June of 2021. So I want to make a comment about the stats that we're seeing. I do think it's awesome that you guys are capturing information, but I would argue that the reporting is woefully underreported. I see coyotes in my yard, and frankly, I haven't been as vigilant about reporting because when I did, a lovely officer came and we chatted, and she really was lovely, but I got a whistle, and the whistles are not helping. My daughter's lungs helped actually. One day there were 5 coyotes in the bottom of our yard. And so the idea of fencing and all of that, some of us have these huge yards that just practically speaking, digging under, unless the city wants to foot the bill for it, it's just, that's not a practical reality for me, certainly. And I'm sure for others in the room. So I don't know that I have a solution other than, and I'm the biggest animal fanatic, but they got to be killed. They got to be eradicated because I can't let my dog out to enjoy our backyard without watching him all the time. And our quality of life and our pets' quality of life is being impacted because the coyotes have more rights than we do and that our pets do. And I think that's really messed up. So anyway, that's all, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gillespie.
Good evening. I'm Paul Rosenlund, live on Oak Avenue near the Five Corners intersection.
Hey, Paul.
Thanks to all of you for putting this on, and I appreciate what you're doing. I was a member of the Planning Commission for a number of years, and I advocated building or allowing the construction of higher than 6-foot fences, and that was shot down. I think we need to look at that as one potential solution. But after looking at these videos, I really have no idea how much that will do. Just a couple of stories and then a request for action. 1 year ago, I was taking my dog out for a walk, 40-pound Labradoodle. We were on Oak Avenue near Five Corners, had a coyote run at us. Didn't get us, but we got away. Personally, I tripped and fell and hurt myself. The dog was fine. The coyote was fine, unfortunately. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago, literally tonight, I stopped taking our dog out for walks at night after that. So in the evening, I would just put her out into our backyard, which is half an acre, duly fenced with 6-foot fences. She went out and she was immediately set upon by 2 coyotes who attacked her. They went after her hard. She got away. I just yelled and screamed until she got away, and she's going to be okay, but only after a couple $1,000s and a night at the veterinary hospital. So it was a terrible experience. There are vicious coyotes out here. At this point, the only solution is to get rid of them. They have to be shot if that is the only legal way. And whoever we can get into this city to take them out, let's make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Hello, my name is Ariane Marlowe. I work at 206 Bayview Avenue. I have a small dog who's fine, although my neighbor's dog was killed, and I think we're next. I think the coyotes have noticed us. I just want to offer a little bit of perspective here, which is really that the problem is getting worse, and we haven't talked about what is likely to be happening. And since I work in climate change, I just want to say none of the people we heard this evening, however helpful and knowledgeable they were, offered this perspective that we've obviously altered their habitat. Yes, it's probably the humans' fault. And yes, we have to help the environment and we have to think about our future generations. But ultimately, the problem is going to get worse. And yes, it's our fault. They don't have enough water. They probably don't have enough food. So they are going to go after more and more of the pets and probably the humans as time goes on. And none of the stats we saw really took that historical perspective. So I just want to say there's a lot of industries, there's a lot of people, a lot of government, a lot of organizations, campuses that are thinking about this problem. And it is new, and it is an emergency situation, and it is getting worse. So I just want to offer that if any of these wonderful people we've heard this evening offer these small suggestions, they might have worked in the past, but they're looking at the rear view mirror, and you need to be prepared for emergencies. Okay, don't wait for something tragic. Okay. Don't wait for me to complain next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Guy Jacquier. I live at 8 Buckeye Road, so I live kind of next to Nancy and sort of down the road from Paul. The coyotes have been in Paul's yard, have been in my yard. I have an Australian Shepherd. She's chased him out 3 times. She goes after him barking. So I have to go flying out, yelling and screaming and attacking coyotes in my yard. Done it 3 times, add it to the data points. But I want to build on something Nancy was saying. We have a woman who lives on our road, Buckeye Road. I think she's about 90 years old. I think she weighs about 90 pounds. Her only exercise, getting out of the house every day, is to walk down Buckeye Road to go to the mailbox. She does that every day for her mental health, to get her exercise and to get her mail. She is in danger. She is walking between Paul's house and my house, where coyotes live. Our dogs have to get them out of there. His dog has been attacked. We've got a 90-year-old woman. Are we going to tell her as a community she can't walk on Buckeye Road? We can't do that. So I agree with everyone who says we've got to take care of it. I thank you all for your efforts. We got to just get rid of the coyotes before someone is hurt, before someone is really hurt.
Thank you. Mr. Jacquier? Mr. Jacquier, can I ask you, did you report those encounters to the police department?
We hear them every other night. We hear them every other night. 1, 2, 3, 4. In our yard, in our neighbor's yard. Our neighbors all have small children. They're in their yard.
Thank you.
And we need to change that. We need everybody to call.
Okay, hang on a second, Brian. Let's follow procedure here. Can you tell me your name and address, please?
So my name is Marielle Simone and I live on Bayview. Last June, my dog was taken when he was peeing in my yard. My house was actually being stalked by coyotes and he was taken and eaten. And a week later, right on the walkway where my dog in my yard walks to get to where he goes and pees, the coyote came and scattered on the walkway. Wasn't like in the yard, wasn't on the grass, wasn't on the hill. It was right in the middle of the walkway saying, this is my territory. I see them every day. I literally 2 nights in a row, and I actually ran to somebody's house because I got crazed. I saw a coyote and went to run him over. He was on Bayview and I chased him. And this coyote stopped. I put my window down. I'm screaming out the window. And this coyote was looking at me, standing probably about less than 10 feet from my car, going, look at this crazy lady. And literally just kept standing there till I got a bottle. I'm like, I need to throw something at him. I grabbed a bottle of water and threw it at him. And he ran into somebody's yard. And I ran into I got out of the car and ran into the person's house saying, do you have any pets outside? And when my dog died, it took me 1 month. I would walk outside of my house with a baseball bat at night. If I needed to go to the front of my house to my car with a baseball bat, terrified. The numbers go on next door and see, the numbers are way higher. The numbers that she said about coyote attacks, Marin Headlands, the runner last year, the little girl on Huntington Beach, on the beach, sitting next to her parents, the little girl that was on video, the 2-year-old, when the dad got out of his vehicle. It is happening. This will happen. And that is like my biggest fear, that I know it will happen. And we need to stop this before somebody's child, their child, they think that their child is safe and in their backyard. I had 3 kids, they're older now, but I remember just walking to my kitchen, my kids playing outside. That's all it takes. A man was sitting on next door, man is sitting on his porch. A coyote came from nowhere. The dog is sitting next to him and snatched that dog. I have a picture. I posted it on Nextdoor of a coyote in front of my house, perched on top of a tree. And if you see the next picture of where this tree is, it is up here and he's looking down the street, looking for somebody to come. They're extremely aggressive. Those numbers, when the Coyote Project put up there, it's, there's only been 4 people attacked. it's not just 4 bites. It's how many people and children around the United States. Just here last year was 4, just
Thank
in
you.
the state of California.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So thank you, because I agree. We need it.
My name's Will Hudson. I live at 160 Madrona. And I think it's a good idea to get the data and figure out what's happening. But at the same time, I think our law enforcement shouldn't be on this island to chase coyotes around. I think the law enforcement needs to be patrolling while we're sleeping and keeping track of the crime around here. In our family, we had 2 cars stolen within the course of a week during the Christmas holiday period. And I can't help but wonder if the good police in this town weren't out harassing coyotes. And I also support eradicating the coyotes right now, aggressive now, and then move into a wildlife management plan later. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Do we have other folks present who would like to make public comment?
My name is Lorraine Gimignani. I live in Tiburon. I'm here tonight because your coyotes go through Tiburon to get here. And so we share the problem with you. And it was great hearing the speakers that you had, but it's all information that we've heard a million times. I think we all know that we're way past hearing about hazing and not feeding and other items that they discussed. This has been very informative, and we plan to have a meeting in Tiburon to address the same problem. So know that as a community, we have a big problem on our hands. And we need to take action. We need to get rid of them once and for all.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Paige Lyon. I live on Britton Avenue. One other thing that I don't want to repeat what everybody else has said, but I think we need to really address the mental health issue. I have small children. I have 2 black labs. If something happened to one of those dogs, I cannot tell you what it would do to my children. Not only me and my husband. I heard about a woman on West Shore, or a man, I don't know, came out and saw their dog on their driveway after the coyote ate part of it. So it's scary for me to walk because I have a 98-pound lab whose natural reaction, if he sees a coyote, is to run after it. I physically cannot hold my dog down, and I've got 2 of them. And what's going to happen is the coyote, the smart coyotes, what they're going to do is my dog is going to follow the coyotes. The coyotes are going to go to the den where there's 4 or 5. They get their feet, they're done. So it doesn't matter what size dog you have. It's not just a little dog problem. It is a big dog problem. And we need to think of what happens to our children. And I mean, my dog is part of our family, my dogs, and it would be devastating. And so I just want to think about that as well, as the mental health of our children and the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lyon.
Hi there. My name is Bruce Bly. I live at 63 West Shore Road. I feel like I live in Animal Kingdom. Right across the street from me, in the middle of the night, I hear cackling, like wild cackling that wakes me up. And I'm an unbelievably sound sleeper. It's unreal. We have a camera that registers any activity, and virtually every night we see coyotes in our side yard. So the other day, I was concerned because I don't want to take the trash out and run into a coyote and then be bitten. So I put a table blocking the entranceway, and unfortunately, within the next 48 hours or so, like the coyotes are coming and going every day right by my yard. And I have a 13-year-old child. I have 3 dogs. So I put this large table to block the entryway. And I have a neighbor at 59 West Shore who unfortunately let her dog out in the evening just to get some fresh air. And she's in her 80s, or I don't know her exact age, but she's an elderly woman. And within maybe 10 seconds, her dog was taken and mauled and mutilated and just left for dead on the street. So I think we're dealing with it. And fortunately, Officer Wu came by the next day and we reported, and he wanted to know if there was a nest, but the tide is coming up and down. So the nests there was no nest, and Officer Wu did a great job, was really responsive. And he suggested we call if we see a coyote. But I mean, heck, I see a coyote every day. My wife is no longer, I mean, it's gotten so significant. Like I call every day. I mean, I literally like it. It's like I see them like I see a neighborhood dog. So my wife is no longer comfortable walking the dogs. It's uncomfortable for us to leave the doors open in our house. Like we want to let our dog out because these coyotes can jump over a fence. So it's really getting to be a nuisance. So I really appreciate what everyone is thinking about this situation. It's getting to be pretty severe. I mean, I'm a decent sized human. I don't think I'm going to die from a coyote attack. But there's a number of elderly people on our street. I mean, the average age on West Shore, there's a number of people that are in their 80s that walk, and their dogs they're being basically tracked by coyotes. So it's just a matter of time before something really, really bad happens to some elderly people. And there's a lot of children that play sports in the street. So, I think it'd be great if we can trap them, move them, or kill them, but they can't live in an area. This is a densely populated area. This isn't Ross where they can run into the headlands. There's no place for them to go. And they simply overrun the community. So I'm just fearful that if we don't do something here, there's going to be a really bad incident. There'll be lawsuits. A lot of bad things will happen for the community. And I really appreciate everyone taking this seriously.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Melanie Walker. I live street to street lot on Madrona. I just want to talk about the packs. I think my property is probably like a little freeway for them. We see a 50-pound male in our yard almost every other day. Over a month, I've probably seen 30 in different areas coming home, going up to the top of the island, coming in on San Rafael Boulevard. I saw 6 running against the shore, going down West Shore between San Rafael and West Shore, going down to the end, which dead ends, it's blocked up and it goes up over the hill. So my front area is on Madrona by Golden Gate and Madrona. The street, our down lot is Bella Vista. My neighbor below me to the right has had both of her pugs attacked. And she sees them jumping from the street below her up to Bella Vista. I have talked to a couple of neighbors on next door about Bella Vista, the lower part of Bella Vista in the 100 block, all the way up to the 260, 280, going up this way, that they are running this way, jumping up over on Madrona, going over across where Golden Gate is. So I actually believe there are 2 packs working here. I'm a 3rd generation rancher. I took over my parents' ranch in 2009. I have been actually shooting coyotes since I was 12. So, there's ways to get rid of them. Although I do own a ranch, I still own a ranch. There was a plethora of coyotes. In fact, following my mom one time down to the mailbox, which is a half a mile away. And we did have to do something about it. All the men and some of the kids, we did cull a lot of them. And it really did help. We had to kill some of the, I would say the males, the head male coyotes. And, every once in a while that has to be done. But I just wanted to make a point about the pack. you know, it's that time of year, February, we're having, I mean, a lot of people that are hearing the yipping, they're hearing pups, new pups. And there could be 6 to 8. There could be a couple of females, 1 male, a couple of singles. And you'll see singles around. Those are probably the bachelors looking for a new territory to get. I know about predators, all kinds. This is probably one of the worst ones, is a coyote. So.
Thank you, Ms.
just letting you
Walker.
know about the packs.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Before we move to our next speaker, I just want the record to reflect our council member Wilkinson has to step out for another city-related obligation. She'll return. We'll keep going. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Matt Chatham. I live on West Shore. First, we're our neighborhood text threads hearing howling on the street right now. So I just want to know that you know that that's actually going on in real time right now. First, I want to thank the council for doing this, but I also want to just remind everybody this has been going on for months. Many of you ran on the fact that we would stop the coyotes, and here we are halfway through February. So thank you for taking action, but it's time that we actually do something. We're not feeding them. We're not. The hazing has happened. The rattling, the getting big, all of this we heard about 3 different times tonight. That's been happening for a long time. So the action that needs to come out of here isn't. I get your job is very difficult and it's hard to sort of move things along, but the action tonight isn't let's try this and see if it works. We need to get rid of these things. It's not safe. I have young children. We moved to Belvedere. We used to live in Tiburon up on the hill. We moved to this neighborhood because we were in the flats and they could roam around freely and be with their friends. They're terrified. It is a real problem. It's hurting the neighborhood. It's hurting the safety. And I deplore you to really take action tonight, please.
Thank you very much.
Adam Zavard, 209 Golden Gate. Kind of similar thoughts. We recently moved here, so I guess the interesting thing, which I heard from the last speaker, is we moved here primarily for the walking culture. We lived on the backside of Tiburon, and we were amazed. We looked around and said, "Wow, this is an amazing place." People walk around freely. Nobody walks around with their dog on a 6-foot leash. People walk around and interact. And we have 2 small kids. We have a dog. My wife doesn't feel safe now walking out on the street. We're talking about, do we move? And that seems crazy. And so I remember, I don't know, it must have been 6 months ago, I pinged Brian. I said, I think there's an issue. I think there's a coyote issue. Obviously, we're not the only one that experienced it. I think everyone has. And I agree. I think it's unfortunate, but I think we do have to take aggressive action. And then I do think we need to have a wildlife plan. And I'm not an expert on the subject. And I haven't been here long enough to see the trend, but even in 3 years, it's shocking. I mean, I walk every day to the ferry and I hear howling, I see coyotes, and my wife doesn't want to go outside. So I was like, that to me is a point at which we need to make a change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have other people in attendance here who would like to address this issue. I'm very sorry to hear that.
I mean, she was talking about children and, about the children. My daughter's 14 years old and devastated. Until today, she's devastated.
Thank you.
Good
Hi,
evening.
good evening.
My name is Golda Beck. I live at 71 West Shore. I've lived there for 50-some years. The coyotes have never been a problem except this year. And I must tell you that we live in fear. Coyotes run our life. We can't walk in the morning. We can't walk at night. We can walk during the day between 10 and 4. It was Lynn Lewis who had her little dog taken by a coyote and killed. It was a little rescue dog. So those things do happen. We do turn this information into the authorities, but nothing has been done. And it isn't apparently our problem. It's apparently your problem to find out if it's Fish and Wildlife or whose it is. but I'm telling you, we do walk in fear and carry an arsenal. Some people carry a stun gun, some people carry a paint gun. I have a dog walker who has 2 alarms, and one is a hootie, which has the lights that go on and off on it. And she also carries a bear horn, and she carries rocks, and she carries a stick. So it's an arsenal that she takes on a walk. And we really think that this is not a place to live and have to do that. Isn't it your responsibility that we don't live here in fear?
Thank you, Ms. Beck. Is there anyone else present who would wish to address this topic? Madam Clerk, can I ask if we have any raised hands on the Zoom who would like to address this topic?
Thank you, Mayor. At this time, for the attendees, if you're a member of the public and have joined remotely and you wish to comment, we ask that you please select the raised hand icon to speak. If you've called into the meeting, we ask that you please press *9. I'm looking over at the attendee side with 101 attendees. I do see 6 raised hands. I'm going to go over and unmute Sandy.
Thank you.
Hi, Sandy stepped away, but I'm Mike, and we're on One Pine Avenue. And we are grateful that the council is convened. But to be honest, I think I can speak for a lot of other people when I say that we've been jumping out of our skins over here as we listen to the casualness with which a lot of this has been addressed. I'm a big fan of all the experts, but honestly, animated figures and laughter throughout the reality of what is happening right now is a little tone deaf. I'm looking at my Ring camera right now, and there's a coyote sitting in my yard right now, where they've been sitting for the last year. We've got a 15-pound dog who is on the menu, and they have been stalking him with extreme prejudice. So we're doing everything right. We don't feed him. We got him on a short lead. But gentlemen and ladies, I kicked a coyote in the head 3 nights ago on Belvedere Avenue, coming up to One Pine. It shot out of the bush. It ran for our dog. I kicked the thing, and it stood there and looked at me as if I wasn't done. I picked up the dog and I left. So thank you for doing this, and thank you to the experts for coming in. But honestly, and with great respect, we've been talking about how to prevent a fire when our house is burning. It's happening right now, and the time to catch up is yesterday. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Just the record should reflect that our council member has returned.
Next, I'm going to go over and unmute Debbie Bennett.
Hi, Ms. Bennett. You might have to unmute yourself.
I'm going to go over and unmute Elizabeth.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
I agree. I've learned more from what the neighbors are sharing, and it's very frightening. And it's very upsetting. I'm petite, and I think some of these animals outweigh me. I have a 6-pound Yorkie, and if I pick up a 6-pound Yorkie, that's one hand left to do all these things that you suggest. And I don't think I could do it. And I agree with what most of my our neighbors are sharing, and that we need to do something now. And I think we need to get rid of them. The other thing I want to say is that we've been going through a pandemic. Nobody's mentioned it, but during the first year, I was very protective, and I felt like I was in COVID captivity. By year 2 and 3, I'm outdoors all the time as much as I can be, but I don't feel safe anymore, and I've never had that feeling. And I've had some bad experiences with the coyotes, like you're suggesting. And it's life-saving. And sometimes if I'm in a bad mood, I'm not someone who reaches for a pill. I don't take pills for anything except vitamins and minerals. So if I'm upset about something, I want to slam the door, walk out in a huff, and walk the ellipse of the island. And now I'm scared to do it. And my dog loves going out, and I love going out. And that's why I'm living here. And so I'm feeling the COVID captivity. And as somebody mentioned previously, it's like living in Wild Kingdom. The other day, about a week ago, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I heard a horrible scream. It sounded like a dog. And there's a big difference between a scream and a bark, and it was a dog scream. It was very close. I didn't know what to do. I walked out on my deck, and I thought, what am I going to do? Maybe I should scream to get help from neighbors. But I thought if I did that, everybody would, I just didn't think it was a good idea. So I ran for a whistle, and I blew the whistle very loudly 3 times in succession. And I still heard the dog screaming. And then I waited, and then I did it again. I was very surprised that none of my neighbors came. Nobody did anything. Finally, the dog stopped screaming. Either the dog was dead, or the coyote gave up. I don't know. But I don't like living like this. And one of the reasons I'm here is because it's beautiful, and I love to be outdoors, and I feel safe. This is
Thank you. Pardon me interrupting, but you run through your time. I appreciate the comment very much, and appreciate you participating.
Next, I'm going to try to unmute Miss Debbie Bennett.
Ms. Bennett, we can't hear you if you're talking. All right, Madam Clerk, can we move on to another
Yes,
Zoom participant, please?
we'll go over and unmute Ava.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Can you tell us your name and address, please? We can't hear you anymore. All right, can we, Madam Clerk, can we move to the next person, please?
I'm going to go over and unmute. It looks,
So Mayor Lynch, Ava is having some trouble joining, so we're going to bring in a new public comment.
I'm going to go over and unmute Mr. Rothman.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. First, I want to say how valuable the Zoom aspect is to this meeting. And one really gets a feeling of being part of a decision that the council is seeking to make on behalf of all the residents. I've listened very carefully, and I've learned a lot. One thing that I observed was that the experts are definitely experts on what they're experts on. By that, I mean they're experts on not taking direct action when direct action is apparently necessary. How to get along with nature. is their position. And I think that's appropriate in some places. I don't think it's appropriate here and now in this circumstance. They've said that the coyotes are very adaptable. Well, I guess they are. And that therefore, and they also said you should wave a plastic bag at them or wave your arms around. Well, that really doesn't make sense if they really are adaptable, because they figure out very quickly that you wave your arms around and nothing bad happens to them. So they quite logically then figure out, gee, I guess that's no threat to me. The other point that I would like to make is that all of the speakers have quite correctly pointed to very frightening things of which I was unaware. And there has not been one single speaker who has advocated that the approach be what any of the experts advocate. They've advocated, because of the danger to them, their pets, and their children, they've advocated direct action. I appreciate that the question of traps was raised and that Mayor Lynch tried to get around quite admirably. Well, you can't shoot them, but perhaps they could be euthanized when they're in the traps. And then I heard, well, the traps really don't work. So that's pretty alarming. So what I think has come down to is, from what Brian Davis said is, and then was acknowledged, that the federal government will come in under circumstances and kill them. And frankly, I don't see that there's a workable alternative to that. One last thing I'd like to say, that in the last year, there was a whole question about whether the council was really being responsive to the concerns of the public and the wishes of the public. And you know what happened to Measure T. So please be responsive this time. Listen to what the public is saying. As I say, there was not one single person who said live and let live with respect to the coyotes. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Bill.
Next, I'm going to go over and unmute Ms. Newkirk.
Hi, Ms. Newkirk.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm probably the one person here for the coyotes. I listened to the experts and I heard what they said. I don't think many people there are hearing what they're saying, which is that we live with coyotes and killing them is not going to keep them away. They will come back. It's just going to open up some more room for more coyotes to come in. You can't get rid of wildlife. We live with wildlife. We're always going to live with wildlife. I understand that there are more coyotes than there typically are, but that they are there for a reason. They don't just show up for no reason. There are resources that they're capitalizing on, and we have to, yeah, you may not be leaving cat food out, but there are unintentional attractants that are happening. And I also want to point out that there have been many attempts to cull coyotes all over the nation, and it actually doesn't work. It actually disrupts their natural reproductive self-regulation so that their populations rebound and even grow as a response. So you may be really angry and upset and in fear and not happy with the way you're living right now, but you have to think about, you know, what are you going to get results from killing animals? And the answer is probably not. They're probably still going to be there. So I think we need to start from the root of the problem, which is getting rid of attractants. That's the number one thing, as the experts said, and they're experts for a reason. They study this stuff. We have to make an effort to find the people who are feeding the wildlife, call the authorities when you see them. I'm sure those people aren't present in this meeting because they are friends of wildlife and they like to feed them. They're probably not at this meeting, but they must exist. And I think that you have to remember there are people who don't like killing animals, and the thought of a bunch of shooting going on in the neighborhood, and maybe one of the gunshots accidentally hits somebody's dog or a human, and what could possibly go wrong in that scenario? I don't think that's the right answer. I think we have to start with an educational approach and work together as a community to solve the problem without getting all excited and killing a bunch of animals. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Newkirk. Do we have any raised hands on Zoom?
Yes, I'm going to go over and unmute Tracy Jacquier.
Hello, go
Can you
ahead.
hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I live on Buckeye Road with my husband Guy. We've lived here 29 years. We've lived with raccoons burrowing under our house, rats, possums, skunks, which are no longer around. Right now, I sit in my seat at my computer and I can hear 3 coyotes howling. So I can't even take the dog out to the yard. I know you're hampered by the California laws, but we can't even leave our dog in the yard outside when we leave for a longer period of time, which we've had another dog, which you have to do sometimes. And I used to take our dog for walks at dusk and evening. I was stalked by a coyote once and I'm no longer allowed to do that. I agree with everybody else. Something needs to be done, but I know the laws will prohibit you from taking out the coyotes with guns, but I don't know what the answer is, but life is different here now. And I agree with everybody else. We moved here for the open space and the walking, so on and so forth, but that is not doable anymore. And I really hope that you can find a way to eradicate the coyotes, because it's really ruining, from everything I've heard, everybody's quality of life here and why we live here.
Thank you, Ms. Jacquier. Do we have other hands raised on Zoom?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, with 94 attendees, we do have 8 raised hands. I'm going over and I'm going to unmute Robin Moore.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to reiterate what Mike Rose said. I was born and raised in Belvedere. I was born in 1953, and my parents had a house on Golden Gate Avenue, still do. And I take care of Mike and Sandy's dog, Freddie. And I have to tell you how savvy these coyotes are. They have cameras on their property. And Freddie came and stayed with me a couple of weeks ago. And the coyotes were nowhere near their property. But when Freddie went back home that very day, Mike took Freddie out and the coyotes attacked him. So they are obviously smelling him and watching him. In fact, they said that the coyotes are inside their yard, 3 of them, waiting for little Freddie every day. So I have dogs too, and I am extremely worried about this. And I just want to find something that we can do. And thank you very much, Mike Rowe and Sandy Dodson, for joining in and giving us your opinion, because really, I've lived here since 1953 and I have never seen anything like this in my life. And thank you for listening to me, Belvedere. I appreciate it. Over and out.
Thank you, Ms. Moore.
Next, I'm going to go over and unmute Ms. Parker.
Hi, this is Evie Packer, and I live at 211 San Rafael Avenue. I have a 60-pound chocolate lab that I can now not let out in my backyard. A couple of weeks ago, I let my dog out like I always do. It was about 7:30 at night, and within minutes, I heard the most blood-curdling scream from my dog that I've ever heard. And there was the coyote. I called the police department. They came over immediately and could not have been more helpful and considerate. But I feel like I'm a prisoner in my house. My dog won't go in my backyard. I can't let her out. Like Tracy said, I can't let the dog. I mean, my backyard's completely fenced with taller than 6-foot fences, and I can't let my dog outside anymore. It is terrible living like this, and I think while we want to be humane and be rational, I think we need to think about the humans. I have little grandchildren that love playing in my backyard all the time. I can't let them go outside in the evening at dusk without being terrified that the coyote will be back. So thank you very much to everyone for using your voices and doing the very best we can to get rid of the coyotes.
Thank you, Ms. Packer.
Next, I'm going over to unmute Dale Burns.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Want to say appreciate everybody on City Council as well as our neighbors who have chimed in on this matter. I think one question is, we may be inadvertently feeding the coyote in terms of our garbage cans that are outside, and whether there's partnership that can be considered with Mill Valley Refuse as to whether we have the appropriate cans that we're all using such that they can't get in and can't use that as kind of one of their resources that's attracting them back to our homes over and over again. And I know, one of the neighbors, spoke to that they're coming here for resources. And as you've heard, I think the concern is that resource, first is food in the garbage can, and then is pets, and then, maybe one of us, which is of concern. Another thing I just wanted to mention is related to exercise and running. So I, for example, like to go running, and if you run into a coyote and you try to follow some of the measures that were recommended in terms of, are you running towards the coyote? Are you running away from the coyote? I mean, just, realistically, at one point you're going to be running towards them, and then if you keep running, they're behind you. And I'm looking over my shoulder to see, is the coyote following me with fear, or, are they going to jump back out, just like someone alluded to, that they know that kind of once you go a little way, they're going to come out again and start following you again. So not much more to add than other people had, but just wanted to make the point about garbage inadvertently being a resource for them that's attracting them, and what we can look at to make that no longer an issue.
Thank you, Ms. Burns.
Next, I'm going to try to unmute Ava.
Thanks so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, terrific. I just wanted to add some caution to the good residents of Belvedere. I think it's very easy to get whipped up into a frenzy, particularly when you're on Nextdoor all the time. But sometimes it's important to keep in mind how you might look to the rest of the Bay Area and the rest of the country. This is a very wealthy community, and you've had a bunch of people come up and talk about their expansive properties and how terrified they are. This is really one of the whitest, wealthiest parts of one of the whitest, wealthiest counties. It's it's also the most racially segregated county in the entire state of California. And when you guys get together and start whipping yourselves into a frenzy about what may or may not be a legitimate fear, it does have a certain taint to it. So I just wanted to caution you a little bit about that. I do want to point out that, you know, my family first passed through Marin County before the 1906 quake. My great grandfather did. And there's a much longer history of Marin County that doesn't include these very wealthy residents with these expansive properties and these gas guzzling vehicles that are creating the climate change, which is in part fueling this higher number of coyotes. And I'd like to recommend Betty Gerke's book, Chief Marin, Leader, Rebel, and Legend. And, you know, the beginning of the book actually lays out some of the history of this area, you know, when there were bears, you know, when there were bears that would swim between raccoon straits to get prey. We are the interlopers. We are the newbies. And, you know, it's important to keep that in mind. Most of the people who've been speaking have been talking about their golden retrievers, their Labradors, their, you know, it goes on and on and on. Those animals should be on leashes. They should be under control. You are in an immaculate setting, and you know, you should respect nature if you want that respect returned to you. And I would just point out that you know, unfortunately, one thing we have noticed is that while you're very concerned about, you know, somebody's dog got attacked, which is very sad, nobody at Tiburon or Belvedere Town Council has said a darn word about the massive fire in the Bronx that killed, I think, upward of 18 or 19 African immigrants that was owned by Belveron partners. So you guys are exporting a lot of destruction.
Thank
Those
you,
were
Ava. I need
safety.
to pause you because your time is up. Before you go though, could you tell us your last name and your address, please? I think she's gone. Do we have any other hands raised on Zoom?
Going over, and I'm going to unmute Kay. Kay, if you can please unmute yourself.
All right, who's next?
I'm going to unmute Jim Turner.
Yes, Jim Turner here, a resident of
Can you give us
Belvedere.
your address, please?
The address is 400 Belvedere.
Thank you very
And
much.
I'd like to let everyone know you can acquire a pellet rifle to defend your property that can stop a coyote called a Gamble Whisper. And it's not illegal to shoot it. The only consequence is to have the weapon confiscated to protect your child or family. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
I'm going to unmute Damien.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi, Damien. Can you give us your last name and your address, please?
No, thank you. Not right now.
That's actually one of the things we ask for our participants.
Sir, it's not law that I have to do that. Yeah, my time is moving along, right? It's not law, it's public meeting. Thank you. My name is Damien. I'll tell you
Can you
that
start the clock, Madam Clerk, please? Thank you. Go ahead, Damien.
My name is Damien. I will tell you that I'm born and raised in Marin City. It's a little community across the water from Belvedere. Most of you probably never heard of it. It's called Marin City. I am third generation Marin County. I've been here a long time. I don't live in Marin City now, but coyotes showed up in Marin City in 2006. There's been no hysteria. The coyotes are good neighbors in Marin City. yes, we're backed up by Mount Tam and Marin Headlands and all that good stuff, but they're good neighbors. We get along with the coyotes. We respect them. They respect us. I don't live in Marin City now, but I am a Marin resident. They are wild animals, but you be good to them, they'll be good to you. So the professionals that have reported tonight, you guys did a really good job of describing, safety measures, what you can and can't do. But all the calls to shoot coyotes is scary. Wow. I must say, as a Marin resident, born and raised here, that the thought of you all wanting to just shoot the coyotes is pretty remarkable. I can only imagine what you think and what you're thinking about doing when I walk through your neighborhood, which we know you call the cops on coyotes and you call the cops on Black folk. So I'm in good company as a Black man. But will you pull a
Thank you,
shot?
Damien.
No,
Oh,
I'm not
I'm
done.
sorry.
I'm not
I
done.
thought you were done. Pardon
No,
me.
I'm not done. I'm not done. So I will say to the city council, as you make your decisions, don't bring in the firing squads. You're doing a great job. You're gonna have pressure. You're gonna have pressure, recalls. I'm sure next door they're gonna say they want to recall you. Pay that no mind. Coyotes are beautiful animals. They do, great deeds for our landscape. They belong here. They were here before us. So thank you all. But as a Marin City resident, they've been around for years now, and there are no attacks. We almost ignore them, and they ignore us. So that's the way it should be. And all the calls for assassination of coyotes. I think that you live so isolated in Belvedere, I think that's giving you a false sense of life, of wanting to shoot coyotes. Wow, scary.
Thank you, Damien.
Looking over at the attendees with 88 attendees, Mayor, I see no other raised hands.
All righty. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to address this issue? All right. Well, then we'll close the public comment and bring it back to council for discussion and any recommendations or direction to staff before we adjourn. Councilmember Wilkinson, can I start with you? You have to put your microphone on.
Thank you for letting me go first. This is it's a really complicated issue in my mind. We, as a city council, we've been taking this seriously for a while. We've been hearing from residents, and we have taken those first steps, which you took late last year, to really try and educate around hazing. And maybe we have not done enough on that front, but it really feels like it hasn't been working. And in my mind, this is a public safety threat that we face. Listening to the experts tonight, it doesn't sound like a trapping program is in any way viable. And so where I'm sort of landing on this right now is that we have some coyotes that seem to have, I don't know what the technical term is, become habituated here, I think it is, and are aggressive. And so my sense of things, but I'd like to hear from other council members, is that we do need to take aggressive action to try and deal with that immediate threat. But it is also very clear from what we've heard tonight that it is a stopgap, that we can do something to potentially eliminate these habituated coyotes, but more will follow. And I think with that, we do need a clear management plan, and we do need to be much more aggressive as a community to do our darndest to haze and haze with any new crop of coyote that might come in. Otherwise, we'll be back to this same situation a year later, 2 years later, who knows? And we can't keep forever going and killing coyote. So that would be my sense of things right now. But one thing I certainly want to learn from staff is, you know, we've all learned about programs on the East Coast. Can we implement something like that through USDA with professionals that come in? And I'd love to understand more about how long those type of programs take, because my understanding is that they're not a quick fix either. They take months and months to implement, because there needs to be a lot of research before they can actually shoot those coyote. And that's, you know, that's the most aggressive route. So I would certainly like to understand more about the actual process of doing that. And I'd also like to get some sense of budget as well. And I know that's not the most important thing at all, but it's important to know if we do this once, how much it costs, how much a management plan costs, how much it would cost to be doing this on a repeated basis, which certainly wouldn't be my preference. So that's my thoughts right now, but I am open to hearing from other council members. And I am absolutely sympathetic to also to the people who've spoken on this call about their concerns for coyotes. I mean, we do have to live in harmony to some degree. It just feels right now that it's out of balance, and there's no way to get it back in balance with the current crop of coyotes that we have here. So that would be my sense.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Mark, can I turn to you?
Sure, yes, thank you. I'll second most everything that Councilmember Wilkinson just said. I heard and jotted down some notes from the presentations earlier, and I heard most of our experts say that coyotes become dependent on once coyotes become dependent on human-associated food, they can become habituated and exhibit bold and aggressive behavior towards other animals and potentially people. And I think that's where we've gotten to. I think no one wants to destroy these or any other animals in particular, but it has reached a point that it is a public safety concern, as was previously mentioned. I don't believe it's a socioeconomic issue nor a racial issue. I'll just put that aside for a moment. It is a public safety issue, and it is, I believe, a multi-step process. Certainly education, hazing techniques, which have happened, should continue. Other steps in association with a wildlife management plan, hazing patrols, better reporting and response matrix. I do think we are radically underestimating and underreporting the numbers of occurrences, for lack of a better way of describing it. They're not data points to us. They're really not. They're real people. They're real animals. They're real experiences. I do think we need to improve how we communicate to our residents what people need to do when an occurrence happens, who they call very directly, what our response is, and what the escalation steps would be should those occurrences in a sense escalate. And I would like to very specifically see a plan on what we can do to eliminate these habituated and coyotes that have demonstrated this not normal behavior. Sounds like from CFW that it's sort of up to us as far as what we can do within our city borders. With obvious caveats related to agreements with any federal authorities if we want to adopt a program through USDA Wildlife Services, and if there's any CEQA requirements relative to doing that. I mean, those I'd like to know more about, and how can we go about a program like this the right way, which is not people running around with weapons, but to set up a program where there's monitoring, determining where these animals are, which ones are perhaps the most aggressive, doing it in a stepped process, and recognizing, as Councilmember Wilkinson said recently, it will come back, but we need to identify how we approach it in the future through these programs of education, so that it's not repeated in a short period of time. But if it happens in the future, we will have a step to move forward. So I am open and would like to encourage to see back in as quick a meeting as we can, hopefully next month, some real options for us to move forward with a plan to, I don't think it's realistic nor advisable or even possible to eliminate all the coyotes, but I think it's a plan to try to identify where the most relevant points of interaction are and eliminate some coyotes that we can identify as aggressive and exhibiting this behavior, pausing perhaps, seeing what that would result in, and then moving forward again. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kennitzer.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for everyone who came and everyone who is listening in remotely. It's incredibly important for us to hear all of you. It's 9 o'clock and I would gladly spend another 3 hours tonight to make sure that every voice is heard. I had taken a couple notes earlier, but certainly added to them tonight. And I think that the suggestion that came out early on in this evening's public forum was a good one, that we need a multi-point plan. But I have 3 points rather than 2. Before I go further, I think it would be interesting to know whether the experts we asked to appear tonight stayed throughout the full public forum. Are we able to track that attendance data? I know that initially the public was was invited to ask questions. They had more comments rather than questions of the experts, but it would be interesting to me to know whether those professionals we had invited stayed throughout the meeting.
Carolyn here. I'm still here, and I know some of the others are as well. And we've been listening the whole time, and definitely appreciate everyone's comments.
Thank you very much. We may be getting back to you to see whether the comments of our community would elicit any further advice, and I'll leave that to staff. But thank you very much for staying. The 3-point plan that occurs to me would be to solve the immediate public safety problem. The second would be to even before that occurs, because that would take months one way or another. I would like to ask staff to invite our fire department to finish the task that we have been asking for quite some time, and that is to remove the dead brush that is also a fire hazard along West Shore Road. And in so doing, would be giving the city important information about where those coyote dens are. I think given the number of people who spoke tonight about on West Shore Road, Britain, Golden Gate, Bayview, certainly that is within range of that. And it strikes me that that area, which I walked again yesterday, is prime coyote habitat. I'm not suggesting that I know anything about whether it would be the only habitat, but it certainly looks inviting, and we really need to get the brush removed. So it seems to me that because it is also a fire hazard, we really, really should ask Chief Lantier to do a site visit. I'm sure council members would be happy to join that site visit, staff, and some of our good residents from West Shore Road. Thirdly, I would like to see a wildlife management plan, but that is a long, as I know, having written several of our plans, that is a longer task, and we can't wait for that now. We have had, those are the 3 points I'd like to go forward with as an action plan. And I would like to ask that whether a handful, maybe 3 people who spoke tonight might like to lead up this is, of course, would be something that I'm just asking the other council members and certainly the mayor's leadership, whether a task force or a citizens working group, an action group might be the way to ensure that such a plan actually go forward expeditiously. I don't want to cite a few people over others because everybody had something to add to this mosaic, but Brian Davis gave us some really good ideas tonight. The Pauls who have put together the petition may be interested. None of this is obligation, and it would be up to the council to decide whether to form such a group. But Ms. Walker, who had experience with ranching coyotes and many, many others. But anyway, it's something that we can discuss. That such a group would be able to, as I say, expeditiously assist our staff in contacting the USDA Wildlife Services to get more information about what they do and why, and whether the data elicited tonight, namely, without limitation, multiple attacks, multiple pet deaths, multiple stalking, property damage in terms of degradation of the hillsides, the difference between packs as opposed to individuals, and the increase in numbers that have been reported. And also, because we have heard good comments from people outside our community, that that part of this inquiry by such a group and the staff would consider the very unusual topography of Belvedere, unlike other communities in Marin that have a easier relationship with coyotes. Belvedere Island has no place for them to get off. Certainly coyotes are seen at Stinson Beach and Ross, many other areas we've discussed that, or San Anselmo or Fairfax, that back onto the open space of the Marin Headlands and Mount Tam may have differences that we really need to examine to see whether these packs are more dangerous to not just pets, but humans than perhaps some of the other communities. Sorry to go on, but I hope that gives, that's the roadmap I would suggest, and I'm certainly open to other comments.
Thank you. Councilmember Cooper.
Well, thank you. I'll second, third, and fourth, all the thank yous. I think what happened to us here in Belvedere is we didn't realize how diligent we all needed to be when all of this began. And it really took us by surprise, and it happened quickly. And I know a couple of months can seem very long, and it can also really just be short in a way. So it has sort of taken a life of its own very, very quickly. I think our entire community is realizing that we need to commit to helping each other solve this problem, deal with this problem. And as noted, we may have to use lethal control at this point. It may be our only option. But as we've learned, non-lethal control will have to become a way of life for us too. And we're going to have to deal with a short-term solution to what appears to be a long-term problem. We do have a lot of other communities that have gone through this that we should be able to learn from, so we don't have to take quite as long as they did. So I'm hoping that by not reinventing the wheel, things will move a little quicker for us. So not to just reiterate everything, but I think what I'd like to see is, if I know that this, a couple of the programs are the wildlife management plan, but there's also one that's run similar to block captains in a neighborhood. And so I don't know how much work the block captains are doing right now, so I don't want to add to there, but maybe that's a way to get information out to people that are nearby, to neighbors, to be able to be available. And we do have that system already set up. So maybe we can look at a way to use block captains. And also I'm hoping that we can, as a city, get this information out that we've all discussed and learned tonight to everybody in the community, and be able to give them, as I think, realistically, this isn't going to happen next week. So what can we do? What can we do right now to support the residents and try to help them? I don't have that answer, even though I've spent many, many hours reading, as everyone else here. And as everyone said, it's not an easy solution. I think we're on the right track, and I'm hoping that we can move forward as quickly as possible with anything we can do. So thank you.
Thank you. Let me just echo the comments of my fellow city council members, and a couple in particular. This human behavior in this community allowed this situation to get to the point where it is. It's going to take human behavior over a sustained period of time to get us back to a balanced and harmonious wildlife situation. And I want to echo Council Member Wilkinson's comment that it feels out of balance right now. This is, I agree entirely, this is a public safety issue. I think the urgency couldn't be higher. And the problem is the solutions require long-term and sustained efforts. We've heard that even the most immediate and extreme sounding or appearing methods have limited effectiveness and take a while even to implement. But with that said, and I realize there's going to be some repetition here, but I did want to just provide a list of what I think are the priorities. First, we need to get a draft wildlife management plan from CFW, pull it off the shelf, modify it for our purposes. And if there's a way to craft it that minimizes or avoids CEQA review, just for expedition purposes, that would be ideal. I don't know what all of that implies. It may be that CEQA is inevitable, but in any event, I think we should start in that right away. As part of that, Councilmember Cooper mentioned other similar plans like a block captain plan, but other programs that are related to that have to do with community hygiene are important for us to look at. including one of the mentions that the Marine Humane Society person said about investigating feeding sources. The experts in all the literature says that it's usually very likely in a situation like this, there's someone intentionally feeding the coyotes. That may or may not be true in this case. We don't know. I'd like to find out. And I'd like to find out if there are unintentional food sources beyond sort of the obvious that we've been talking about tonight. So that's sort of point one. Point two, I think we need to learn back from CFW what trap options are available. We asked them, they said they would get back to us. The codes are a mess, and it's not clear exactly what is permissible. And we also need clarity around what options exist for dispatching trapped animals. That's information that I think that when we get it from CFW, we want to be able to get it to the community as soon as possible, so that residents can take that action on their own property if appropriate. Third, I think we need to start tomorrow, continuing to track down with USDA what options are available with their wildlife management control programs. I know Vice Mayor Mark had spoke with the folks in Nahant, Massachusetts. We're familiar also with the Mercer Island event, and Mr. Davis raised that, and we've all read about it. I think we need to explore that right away. My understanding from the Nahant situation was that it took them something like 8 months to get from sort of beginning to end where they had a deal with the USDA. And so I think we need to try to move as quickly as we can. And then fourth would be echoing Councilmember Kevinser's point about vegetation management, which has the dual purpose of some habitat control and also wildfire risk reduction. Those are the four priorities that I would focus on. And I realize there's some overlap, but I think there were some very good suggestions here tonight. I don't know if other folks have other comments at this point.
I'm interested in the idea of a very small, limited task force that can work with staff in the very near future to make sure that this doesn't lose momentum. How can I say that nicely?
Yeah, I think that is potentially a good idea. I want to be very careful that we are neither the city council nor the staff would be delegating our duties and obligations to a citizens group, but rather that we would be moving forward with all speed, and that a group that was working with us would be working alongside and helping and being an additional resource as opposed to a group to whom we would turn for solutions and wait for answers to come back. Is that the way you're thinking of it?
I'm thinking that we have had ad hoc committees and task force in the past that worked on a very condensed time frame and perhaps be able to come back to us within a month, doing some of this research, which will certainly take some time, and come back to us with recommendations with a very short leash. We don't want to delegate, but I do know that the five of us are working almost full time on some of the other issues that are before us, housing and otherwise. And I don't know that we could do the kind of research that a small task force might benefit from. But I'm open to whether that's the best idea and whether citizens are willing to step up and do that. It's a time commitment on a short time frame.
Go ahead, Councilmember Wilkinson.
So I'll dig in a little bit on that. So I'm concerned in terms of speed. We've been told very clearly here tonight that we need to act and as quickly as possible. And when we've set up task forces in the past, it's normally been because we're looking for expertise. And we don't, as far as I'm aware, have expertise. We're just looking for, so I'm not really sure what the purpose is. I think we've given very clear direction to staff. And so I think it's staff's job at this point to do that work. And I'm just concerned about too many cooks. And I feel like we've got a very good and clear message from the community as to what they want, and that we should take that and move that forward as quick as possible. So I'm just concerned about too many cooks, and I'm not sure that adds value because it's not bringing expertise, which is what we would normally get from a task force.
I think this is something we can probably pick up at our next meeting.
Yeah, I just quickly, two quick things. One is I agree with Councilmember Wilkinson that not a big fan at this point of further research and, further reports. I think it's a time for finding out what USDA can and if they can do anything for us. If they can't, what other options do we have for as quick a program as we can put in place to, as we've all discussed, address the problem animals that do exist. And the second thing, Mayor Lynch, I'm very hesitant to encourage or to have a perspective that homeowners can and should do something themselves. You mentioned trapping or something else. That concerns me. I don't know if I'm just me or if I don't know. I feel comfortable saying someone should go off and do something by themselves, whether it's a pellet gun or whether it's a trap and ranchers notwithstanding, do something on their own. That frightens me a little bit. I'd rather move diligently and no, I know. I get it. No, certainly, I get it.
Wait. It's not being picked up on the record.
So I would rather move hastily and judiciously ourselves than pause and, in a sense, give residents the motivation to do things themselves. That concerns me.
That's a very good point, and I really appreciate it. I think what I'm focused on is making sure our residents understand what they're able to do. So we wouldn't be, as a city council, we wouldn't be granting powers and rights to citizens to do whatever they wanted on their property, but rather helping them understand what is permissible under the law. I think we are doing the community a service if we let them know what is permissible under the law with respect to their own properties. It doesn't mean that we're encouraging it. We certainly can't create in them the power to do that. That's established by existing law. But I wouldn't want a homeowner, a property owner here to come to us and say, what am I allowed to do on my own property? And us say, either we can't tell you or we can't help you figure it out. So that was the main point that I was making. Not that we're endorsing or blessing or encouraging, but helping property owners understand what they're able to do.
Could I ask staff? So I think a very good point has been raised, and specifically that is whether tonight's conversation gave staff enough direction to move forward immediately, really, investigating what's possible with or not possible with the USDA, what's possible and not possible with CFW, whether they have the format for such a wildlife action plan, management plan that we could put together quickly with our small staff, and whether you are comfortable moving expeditiously without a citizens group that would sort of give you additional information. The points that you all have raised are are very well taken here. And in my mind, it's really what is the best way to really have an action plan in hand within our next couple of meetings.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Kennitzer. My impression from tonight is that there's been a lot of, really great information and clear direction from council on what staff's next actions need to be. Primarily, it sounds like contacting USDA is one of the first things we need to do. And certainly I've heard a lot of good feedback from all the council members tonight, not just on the bulleted items that Mayor Lynch pointed out, but other action items that we should be looking into as staff. I think we have the capacity, at least for this short term, to handle all the short-term tasks. Potentially long-term tasks might benefit from having a task force of some kind in the future.
Thank you very much. Well, that's all the answer I need. I think, thank you. Thank you for taking that on.
Go ahead, Councilmember Wilkinson.
I was just going to ask whether often when we have projects, we assign 2 council members as the sort of lead on a project. Is it worthwhile doing that here, or is staff perfectly happy to sort of work alone on this?
Well, I think it's always great if there's 2 council members, 1 or 2 council members that are interested in, I guess taking a lead on a project like this. I'd be happy to work with anyone who's assigned.
Thank you. Do we have any volunteers among my colleagues?
I'll be happy to.
Vice Mayor Mark, thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Cooper. That's wonderful. I really appreciate that. I think you guys did a phenomenal job on the housing element. We're getting the band back together for this. That's terrific. Thank you very much.
Sounds like the newbies get these assignments.
Are there any other comments or discussion before we adjourn? Well, I want to thank everyone for coming, everyone on Zoom who attended. I want to thank all of our panel of experts who participated. Thank you to staff for putting this together. Thank you to my colleagues for all the diligence and time put into this and for staying late. Appreciate it. We're adjourned.